Hello, and welcome to another TMRN Time Monk Radio Network production. I'm McLaren, and today is Saturday, June 16, 2012. Joining us today is physicist Dr. Tom Campbell to discuss consciousness. If you are unfamiliar with Tom's work on consciousness, he has a lot of information to help you build a bridge to cross the corpus callosum from what you might think is a left brain, right brain conceptual chasm, and to explore areas beyond the constraints of the physical brain. Consciousness is a digital information field, to use Tom's word. It exists beyond and transcends the physical material reality limited to the concept that is often described as neurons. Tom's websites are mybigtoe.com and mbtevents.com. MyBigToe, T-O-E, is short for Theory of Everything. On the websites, you'll find a bookstore enabling access to Tom's writings and DVD. You'll find internet links to video and audio of his presentations and prior interviews, a link to discussion groups and a forum, and a section containing workshop and seminar slides. Dr. Campbell has been a guest on numerous streaming alternative media radio programs, and there are quite a few YouTube media presentations also available. At mbtevents.com, there is much more than can be summarized, so we'll leave it to the listeners to explore that on their own. Tom's work is most fully developed in his book, My Big Toe. It introduces and explains his theory, the logical support for the theory, other aspects of his thinking, and his message about consciousness. There is much more there than any of the multimedia modality can ever expound upon. Hello, Tom. Welcome to Time Monk Radio.
Well, thank you very much. It's my pleasure to be here. Maybe we can say some things that will interest people out there in the listener land.
We certainly hope that we'll be able to assist them and they'll get something out of this. The Time Monk Radio administrator is Vox, and today he'll be doing the recording and technical support of the show. Several members of the forum were kind enough to join us for this discussion. They include members Uranus Rising, Chipperdog, and Keeley 1247. Again, Tom's websites are mybigtoe.com and mbtevents.com. This interview will be available for free at timemonkradio.com, on YouTube at the Time Monk Radio channel, and at the website webbotforum.com. Are you ready to begin, Tom?
Yes, I'm ready to begin.
Okay. Our discussion today will be segmented into several topics, the first of which is big and little toes. And the first question will come from Uranus Rising. Uranus?
Hello, Tom.
Hello, Uranus.
It's lovely to speak with you. You spent much of your first book of your trilogy illustrating how to deconstruct mental paradigms and belief systems. Would you just briefly speak of why this is one of the first steps towards approaching the big picture?
Well, certainly. Beliefs are a major problem. And the reason that beliefs are a major problem is that beliefs are limiting. If you believe that this is the answer, I may be using belief in a little bit of a special way here, that people use words, with many shades of meaning to them. In the sense I'm using belief is that if you believe it, then that's it. You're no longer open to it being different than what you believe. When we have a belief and we get information contrary to that belief, we tend to ignore the information, explain it away with our belief, say, well, that couldn't possibly be true because, we believe it's this way. So belief is a big problem. If you believe things, then you're not open to those things that you believe being different than the way you believe them to be. So we need to get rid of belief in the sense of tearing down the walls that blind us. That's really the point of belief. I'm a big believer in, did you see that? I'm a big believer. See, we use belief in many, many different ways. And so I'm beginning to explain why, the way in particular that I'm using belief here. The idea of open-minded skepticism is the way I would approach and hope that everyone would approach new information. You should be open to new information, but you should be skeptical of new information. And of course, that includes anything that I might tell you. You know, you should be skeptical of everything that comes at you that's new. But that doesn't mean skeptical in the sense of what we have come to sometimes see as skeptics, which means, you know, everything is wrong unless I believe it. See, that's not being skeptical at all. That's belief again. You see, that's not skepticism. Skepticism says, maybe, well, let me listen and see what's going on there. Let me take in this information and assess it. And then I will assess it some kind of probability, as opposed to, and then I will decide whether I should believe it or not. You see, that's the wrong approach. The look at new information and decide whether you believe it or not is unproductive. Looking at new information and saying, well, what's the probability that this, you know, could be helpful, that this might be right? How does this fit with the rest of my experience and understanding? And if you decide that it's of very little use, well, that doesn't necessarily mean it'll stay that way forever. You may learn other things that put this new information back into play again. So instead of throwing it out, if you, quote, don't believe it, unquote, better to just hold it off to the side and say, don't know, don't really have a lot of information, but I'll hold it over here and perhaps I'll use that someday. I give it a 10% chance of being useful, or a 99.9% chance that it's, you know, that it's accurate, but don't feel obligated to believe it or not believe it. That immediately builds a wall around the information that you can use.
Yes, and I love how you say open-minded skepticism, and that's really rings true for me. And that also fits in with what you said of matching it to our experiences. And as our experiences grow, our belief might grow too. So thank you for that.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. If you are open-minded but not skeptical, you're a believer. If you are skeptical but not open-minded, you're a believer.
Yes.
You see, the only route out of being a believer and limiting yourself is open-minded skepticism. Yeah. That's the only path that actually, you know, leads somewhere.
But sometimes that's kind of hard to do, because we want to believe something because then it's done and dusted. And it's hard to hold an open mind sometimes, you know.
It is, and the reason it's so hard is that we have a kind of an innate fear of uncertainty. And I think that's partly because we are social animals. You know, I'll call that the herd mentality. You know, herds are like that. When something, you know, a noise they don't understand or something that isn't familiar, they jump and run. You know, that's the nature of herd animals, and we have that in our makeup as well. And that is that when we find something that's uncertain, something that's new to us, it tends to frighten us. We're not sure about it, and particularly if it's something that might be very important to us. And we can't stand it that we don't know this important thing. So our way to solve that problem is to come up with a belief, and then everything's fine. You know, now we're done. Of course, we're done learning anything new, as well as, you know, done with our fear. So I think it's just part of the way we are as the, you know, the human herd, is that we get very nervous when things are, you know, we have loose ends, things are uncertain.
Yeah. Well, maybe it's time to move on then. Thank you.
Okay. You're welcome.
We'll now turn to Chipper Dog for the next question.
Tom, along with an open-minded skepticism, what qualities would be a good prerequisite for a serious inquiry into the nature of the real or big picture reality?
Okay, there's not real high prerequisites for a serious inquiry. Serious intent to discover the truth, significance and meaning, okay? Commitment, which means take a long view. if you work at this seriously for a week and don't get very far and then quit, that isn't going to work either. So you need to be serious as far as discovering truth, significance, and meaning. You need to be committed to a long view of making this a lifetime's quest, if you will, and of course, open-minded skepticism. So those are the things that if you have those, you'll probably eventually end up with either the right answer or close to the right answer, or I should say right answers. And by right, I mean something that helps you evolve the quality of your consciousness, something that helps you find joy, love, peace, in your life. Now, there are some things that will speed up your process, but everybody is kind of at a different place with how much or little of this they have. And that is as little fear, as little ego, as few beliefs and expectations that you can manage, the better.
Right.
But all of us are a little bit in a different boat about, how much of that we can manage.
Well, I guess patience is a learned quality with a long-term view like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've been working in this area of, consciousness research for about close to 40 years now.
Mm-hmm.
So it's it has to be a way of life.
Well, thank you.
We'll now return to Uranus Rising, who will provide the next two questions for Tom. Uranus?
Does big consciousness allow suffering, tests, and challenges, or might it only seem like such from a little consciousness perspective, attached to expectations of good feelings, success, or continual happiness? And from big consciousness perspective, are these really experiences of suffering, tests, and challenges?
Okay. Let me rephrase the first part of that is, does the larger consciousness system intend suffering? And the answer to that would be no, just interaction and choice. Suffering is our interpretation based on our fear, ego, belief, expectation, that sort of thing. However, the larger consciousness system is aware that from our perspective, we do suffer. Okay? As far as tests and challenges goes, it falls in that last category. Yes, the larger consciousness system intends for us to be tested and challenged, and it's aware that we struggle. The tests and challenges are kind of in front of us because we don't grow unless we reach out and take a challenge. You might say taking a challenge is being tested, but this life is about the choices we make. And if we make choices that lead us toward growth, and my definition of growth, of course, is raising the quality of your consciousness. Some people might call it spiritual growth. Also, it's evolving, your consciousness. Let's see, well, other people might say moving toward being love. That would be another expression of it. So these are all the things we're supposed to be doing. Growing up is another expression. And to do that, we have to pull ourselves up by our bootstraps. Nobody can do it for us. And when I say pull ourselves up by our bootstraps, that's like, if we were going to be an athlete and, run a mile, in 5 minutes, we'd have to work at it and work at it. We'd have to build up our ability to process oxygen more effectively. We'd have to build up our muscle. We'd have to do a lot of things. And how do we do that? We don't buy more muscle. We just have to work at it until the muscle grows and does what it is we need it to do. It's the same way with this. When I say pull yourself up by your bootstraps, it's something that you have to do. Just like nobody can help you run a mile in less than 5 minutes. You have to do it. It's your thing. You have to build up your body, build up your mind, build up your wind, build up all the things that you need. And you do that by practicing, by trying, by effort, by dedication. And this is the same sort of thing. So that's what I'm saying is challenge. To run a mile in less than 5 minutes is a challenge. And if we don't accept that challenge, then we'll never do that. It's just be one of those things we'll never accomplish. If we do accept the challenge, then we have to actually make it happen. Now, we can have a coach that can help us maybe find our way to answer that challenge more efficiently or more effectively, but the coach can't run it for us. We have to do it. And living in the larger reality, finding a big kind of a big picture perspective is like that. So yes, we, from our viewpoint, we suffer. Most everybody, if you ask them, they'll tell you that they suffer at least some of the time. And, lots of people feel like, life sucks and it's hard, and, they are constantly struggling. That's kind of a common viewpoint. But it's not that the larger consciousness system intends for people to struggle. What it hopes for is that people will outgrow needing to struggle, that they will become love, that they will pull themselves up by their bootstraps and raise the quality of their consciousness, evolve their consciousness. So it's not intended that we suffer, but we do, because we have fear and we have ego and we have expectations, and those things are ours, that we create for ourselves, and those are the things that make us suffer. But existence is a challenge itself. Just that we're here is the challenge to grow up.
Yes. Wow. And would you talk about how holding a bigger picture can help us in this particular physical material reality? I mean, how big do we need to go? And then what do we do with that? Is it just about achieving a bigger picture, or is it about integrating the picture we arrive at, or simply our being in this physical reality now, however much of a big picture we can experience?
Okay. How does understanding the bigger picture of reality, benefit us individually? Let's say, well, it benefits us by teaching us, or I shouldn't say teaching us, by allowing us to understand what the game is and how to play it. Okay, we are here to evolve the quality of our consciousness. If we understand that's why we're here, and understand what that means, then we can do a whole lot better at achieving that goal. If you are, if you have never heard of baseball and have no idea what the rules are, and somebody sticks you out in the field, you're just wandering around clueless. You don't know what to do. The ball comes out. What should you do? Take a picture of it, kick it, pick it up and throw it over the fence. What do? You don't know, because you have no idea what the game is. So you become an ineffective player. So if you don't have any notion of the larger reality and what you're supposed to be doing, then it's very hard to be very effective at doing that. So that's one thing. So how far do we need to go? Well, just as far as is useful to you now. You could say to the limits of your capacity now, but I don't mean that as intellectual knowledge, okay? The idea is to live, to be, to exist as an aware part of the big picture. And that doesn't mean, doesn't necessarily mean intellectually. It's not about, you have to understand the bigger picture with your intellect. You have to understand how all the various things are related, and, how things happen and why they happen. And that's not the point. You have to understand it at the being level. There's two levels that we work at. One I call the being level. That's the level at the core of your being. That's where your intent forms up. This is at the core of your being. And we have the intellectual level, which is the level at which you think, which you process, which you analyze. For example, let's say you see somebody walking just ahead of you, and a $20 bill drops out of their pocket, and you come up behind them, you pick it up, you look around to see if anybody saw you do that, and you notice that a couple of people did see you. So you decide that you've been caught. So you go up and tap the person on the shoulder and give them the $20 back. Okay. Now that is somebody who's using their intellect to decide how to act, as opposed to somebody who does something just because that's the way they are. So imagine another person, let's say you this time, this you is going to work from the being level, and you come up and you see the dollar bill, and right away you want to quickly pick it up and give it back to them because it's theirs. and they dropped it. And you don't think about it. It doesn't matter who's watching or not. There's no intellectual analysis of it. You're not saying, well, what should I do here? What's the right thing to do? Well, should I pick it up and keep it? Losers, weepers, finders, keepers, or what? You just do it because it's you at the core, you see? So much of what we process and understand is really at the being level. So I don't want people listening to think that, oh, I have to go out and learn this. You don't have to learn it. You have to be it.
Yeah. Well, I think that's why I asked that question, because I've seen so many times where people want to learn, but then how they are, their beingness in life doesn't match that. And I do think that having that integration where you walk the talk, so to speak, is where the magic happens and what we strive for.
Well, it's absolutely necessary. Otherwise, we don't actually gain anything. People could read all 3 of my books. They could memorize them so that they could quote any part in it, and it won't do them a bit of good if they don't actually learn anything, at a deeper level, at the being level. If it doesn't change them in some way, then it's really been a waste of their time.
Yeah. Well, I don't think I'll have any problem trying to memorize your book. So.
Me either.
Thank you for that. Much appreciated.
Yeah, you're welcome.
So, Tom, you were talking about going through these different experiences and integrating them into your life as we exist here. Maybe you can help us to understand how and of the experiments that you conducted to grow your understanding of consciousness and gain a better understanding of the non-physical material reality. Which were those that were most convincing for you that there is so much more present in the past, ongoing, and coming up in the future beyond this physical, deterministic material reality that everybody is so familiar with?
Okay, well, let me answer that in 2 parts. One is kind of a historical answer of what was most convincing. Where did I get the aha moment that this model of mine was real? Well, I got that aha moment long before I had the model. So, but how did that come about? And the second part is, though, what is it about your reality in every day that convinces you that it's there's more to it? So, we'll do those in 2 parts. The first part was an experience I had in Bob Monroe's lab, and maybe a very short background is I ran into Bob Monroe back in the early 70s, 1972. And myself, a physicist, and Dennis Menerick, an engineer, we both connected with Bob. He had a lab that he had just built, wanted to study consciousness so that he could put this out-of-body experience, which he experienced without trying and couldn't not do it. He wanted to put it on a kind of the acceptable map of things that are scientific. So he wanted to study consciousness. And the agreement Dennis and I made is that we would be his scientists and help equip his lab, come up with protocols, run experiments, do that sort of thing, if he would teach us what he knew about exploring the larger consciousness system, about going out of body. And the process went on for years and years and years. But one day, Bob had an experiment for Dennis and I, and that experiment was that we should go out of body together, and that we should go someplace together, have an adventure, meet people, see things, have discussions, talk to each other, talk to other entities as we found them, and that we would do this together. But now physically we were separated and in isolation chambers, so we could not hear or see each other. We were both lying in a dark room that was acoustically isolated, was electromagnetically isolated, and we each were speaking into a microphone, which then Bob Monroe in the control room was recording on a cassette tape.
Wow.
Way back in the days of cassette tapes, right? So this was going on, and we're lying here, and we went out of body, we met, we went off on an adventure, took about 2 hours, and it was a very evidential thing. By evidential, I mean a lot happened. A lot of specific things happened. If you just said, well, we both sat in a gray cloud and, didn't say anything or do anything, that would really not be much evidence that we were together. So we stumbled out of our booths, went to the control room. Bob Monroe had a kind of a sardonic wit that he liked twisting tails just a little bit. So he looked at us and said, well, do you guys think you were together? Do you really think so? And Dennis, of course, didn't know what I had just done, and I didn't know what Dennis had just done or said. So we looked at each other, and I said, well, I think so. And he agreed. So then Bob said, well, now listen to this. And he reached up and he flipped two switches, which started two cassette tapes, which is Dennis's tape and my tape. And he ran them at the same time so we could see how they interacted. And there was Dennis and I having conversations, answering each other, seeing the same things, interacting with the same entities. It was obviously we were both there doing, saying, interacting with the same, situation.
Wow, what an experience.
Now, that was a very powerful experience. Up until that time, my thought was, well, this is interesting. We've done things that say that this is real. We had, probably about 2,000 or 3,000 to 1 that the data that we got, because we did remote viewing, we did healing, we did as many evidential things as we could think of. And we were pretty successful at those things. And it was thousands to 1 that we could get the information we got, say in remote viewing, just by chance, that you just made it up or was a lucky guess. So we knew statistically that what we were doing and experiencing was real. But that's different than getting it at a gut level. And when I had this experience with Dennis, my jaw probably dropped to the floor. And I think Dennis's did too, as we listened to all this stuff. And I spent the next couple of weeks in a daze thinking, oh my God, this is real, because it just hit me that way. There was no other explanation. You see, that we both got the same thing is hard to explain if you weren't actually there. So the only other way to explain it was with one of us was imagining it and the other was telepathically picking it up. But that was really not as likely as that we were both just there in the same out-of-body experience, because why would it just be one of us? And why would the other one happen to pick it up? And which one of us was the leader? Because we were both, it wasn't that one person always said, oh, look at this. And the other person said, yes, I see it. It wasn't that sort of thing. We were both seeing things, both describing them as they came into view and so on. So that didn't make any sense. The only logical conclusion one could come to is that the trip was real, that the out-of-body was another reality system in which we both were exploring at the same time. So that was the big one for me. After that, I no longer questioned the reality of it. But now, as far as every day, how is it that I know these sorts of things are real? Well, you find out that as you live in the larger reality, you live in a bigger reality, you evolve the quality of your consciousness toward being love and that sort of thing, everything just starts to work so much better for you. You find out that your life is I don't know, things come and happen just as you need them to come and happen. Life is full of fun and joy, and relationships are terrific, and it's just a hoot. It's just a good time going from day to day. And that's the result of an understanding and of some success in evolving the quality of your consciousness. And to me, that is very positive. That's reinforcing, and says if this was just kind of random stuff you're making up that isn't real, then how does it affect your life like this so dramatically? So that tells me that it's real. It has very definite things that you can measure about it. People will tell you that you're different. They will like you more because you give up all that ego and fear and stuff that not only makes you miserable, but makes everybody else miserable too. So it does seem to be a real thing.
No, thank you. It does help. It's a story I've heard you tell before, and it's certainly makes it all the more real for me hearing you repeat it with more depth, and sounds in your voice just carry over the truth of what you experienced. Thanks, Tom. We're now going to turn to Keely, and she'll have the next question for you.
Hi, Tom.
Hello.
I have a question related to a part of one of your presentations that I viewed on YouTube, where you said that in a probabilistic reality, almost anything can happen in the margins of uncertainty, and often does, and that thoughts and intents change a given result up to and until data comes into reality, ergo the uncertainty window. Uncertainty being what the rule set allows is what you said.
Right.
Would you speak to how an individual might determine probability available to him or her within a given uncertainty window, and whether it matters or not, measured next to experience with the non-physical matter reality and relative to decisions he or she might make?
Okay. Well, that's a lot. Hope I can remember all of that. First thing you can do is that, yes, well, let me back up a little bit. It is true that you can modify future probability. Now, the future is not a done deal. We don't live in a deterministic reality. We live in a probabilistic reality, and everything that has a possibility of happening has a certain probability of happening as well. And you can modify those probabilities with your intent. So that's kind of the basic fact that we're working in. Now, you can modify the probability within the uncertainty that's natural to that event. Okay, so you're not going to modify the probability that you can flap your arms and fly. You see, that's not going to happen because that is not allowed by the rule set. We are constrained by this rule set. Otherwise, we would not have a very buttoned down, coherent reality if we were not. So those are some of the parameters. Now, to your question, uncertainty, let's see, how might an individual determine the probability that's available to him? So how much can you change it? And how do you decide whether or not, what is this range in which you can change things, I guess is kind of the question. The first thing is that you can just ask. The larger consciousness system is information based. It is a digital system, digital information system. That is consciousness. Our reality is a virtual reality. And in this particular virtual reality, we have databases that are the future probable reality. That's all the things that are possibly, that are possible that could happen, and the probability that they will. And then that, as time goes on, that goes through the present where we have free will to act. And then what comes out after the present is the past, and that's a database that has everything that might have happened and the probability that it did. And a particular thread through that particular database, it just goes through all the things where the probability that it did goes to 1. Those are all the things we did, and that becomes our history. So if there's anything in there and we'd like to know, well, what's the uncertainty around this? How much can I actually move this? One, you can ask. You can go into that database. You can go to the larger conscious system with your intent, put the question out, and you will get an answer. So you will basically get that information. Well, you're not going to move this very much. Here's why. You shouldn't move this. Maybe you could, but here's one that you should leave alone. Or, go give it your best shot. It's completely open to your ability to modify it. The second thing that you could do, given that maybe you don't have the ability to access that data, just try it, see what happens. That would be my second thing, how you can tell whether or not you can move a probability or influence event. Just give it a try. Focus your intent. We can talk later if you like about how one does that, but you can just focus your intent on modifying the future probability. In other words, on an event coming out a certain way or not. And that focused intent, if you really can know how to do that well, modify that probability. Of course, there may be other people trying to focus that intent to some other outcome. And all of that kind of competes with each other. Some things are more easy to change than others. Some have very high probability. So if the probability of this happening is a 0.99999, it's going to be hard to modify that a whole lot because it's very, very probable, you see. if some probability is, well, it could be this way, or it might be that way, or it could be another way, and all those probabilities are about equal, then it's much easier to modify the probability to come out at a particular end state. Does that answer your question? Or have I kind of gone around and around but not really answered it?
No, you really have been very helpful. The only other thing I would ask is relative to where you say about clear intent. Suppose you're in a situation and you have to make a decision right that moment. If you go into the space that you're talking about for information and you ask for the best possible outcome, would that be considered to not be a clear and concise intent?
Well, you would have to say a little more other than the best outcome. You'd have to define a little bit about what best was, because there could be 4 or 5 different viewpoints on what the best outcome is. Now, you could say, I'd like the outcome to be the best for this individual. And by best, you might mean that in the long-term view, okay, in the longest view, they would end up with the greatest increase in the quality of their consciousness, which means they would grow up to whatever extent possible based on this things. So that they would just be the best for them, which means if they had an illness and that illness was really a good teacher, they needed that illness to learn something, it wouldn't take the illness away. It would just maybe improve their probability of learning the lesson, not missing it. So that way you'd say, whatever helps this person, grow up, become, love, then that's what I would like for them. Or you might just say, whatever helps this person be whatever they want to be, however they want it to come out. I just want to help them have it come out however they want. That would be a different request. Or you may have something of your own that you want to put on there. But you can ask general questions like that, but you need to be a little specific about what do you mean by best outcome. Or you might leave it to the system altogether and say, well, listen, larger consciousness system, I would like to put some effort into it coming out however it suits you best, however you think it'll be best, and try to put some energy that way. But the way the intent moves probability is that if it's very general, then it has a very general result. In other words, it's not real focused. So you kind of, if you're healing somebody and you say, well, I want you to just, feel better or do good things. It's one of those general statements. You kind of get a general result out of it. Whereas if you focus on a very particular thing, you put a lot more, I don't know, we use the word energy, but energy is a metaphor here. You put a lot more energy on that particular specific event being the way that you are, to what you're moving it toward. So that's an analogy would be that if you had sunlight coming through a window, okay, it's just generally warm if you stand anywhere in the sunlight. But if you take a big magnifying glass and you focus that sunlight on a point, now you can set things on fire. You can actually make pretty big changes other than just mildly kind of warm things up. You can burn a hole, in a piece of metal if you have a big enough sunglass. So that's the same thing. If you can really focus your intent on something, you'll get a lot stronger result than if your focus is, do good things, be nice, live long and prosper, or something like that. Does that help?
That does. And thank you, Tom, for your answers. Appreciate them.
Oh, you're quite welcome.
Okay. Thank you very much for those questions, Keely. Uranus, I believe you're next up in the queue.
Tom, you were just speaking about change, and many people want change today, or want to change the system, or make changes at the top, or make changes in the outer world. How do you see real change, and how could that happen, and what does that require of us?
Well, that's a very good question. There's lots of people that feel like if we could just get rid of, or if we could just change the attitude of, and then of course there's a long list, the government, the banks, the corporate entities, the Oh, I don't know. You know, the people who control us and, you know, make us dance like puppets, et cetera, et cetera. If we just got rid of them, everything would be fine. And that, of course, is wrong. That's a hallucination. Change has to happen from the bottom up. You know, what does it require of us? It requires us to grow up. Requires us to get rid of the fear, get rid of our ego, get rid of our expectations, get rid of our beliefs, because the world out there with all of these things that happen, you know, with the banks that charge us fees for, you know, things that cost them no money because it's just part of a computer transaction, but we get charged $20 for it, et cetera. We have all these things, and of course the government is always the bad guy and does all sorts of evil things in the night while nobody's looking. These things, this world we live in, with all of its negativity, with all of its horror, and with all of its meanness, and all of its fear, that's us. You know, that is a accurate representation of the way we are. We create that reality. It represents us. That's how much fear, that's how much belief, that's how much ego and expectation that there is running around loose in the world. So it wouldn't be that way if all the people were full of love and compassion, you see, because all the people would include all the bankers and all the people in government as well. It's not just that they have big egos and they have fear and they are, you know, not nice. It's that that's the way we are. It's all of us. Those people in charge are people that we are, just like we are, and they have the same kinds of problems we have. They're struggling with their fear and ego too. They just happen to have more power.
Yeah.
I think in general, if you took a person off the street, a random draw on somebody on the street and put them in a position of power, you'd find the same thing as the people in power, you know, have, you know, now. It's not that the little people are blessed and near perfect. It's the big people that ruin things. The little people just don't have any power, or the power they have is small. All they can do, you know, is kick their dog. They can't kill 100,000 people in a meaningless war. So it's not change at the top. It's change at the bottom. And change at the bottom, we have to say, is not change other people. It's not about changing someone else. It's about changing yourself. So how do we make the world a better place? We as individuals need to grow up and get rid of the fear and ego and belief, expectations, all that whole long list, you know, needs, wants, desires, you know, all of that stuff we get attached to. We need to let that go. And if we do it, we become part of the solution rather than part of the problem. And that's the only way to do it. You can't force someone to grow up. It's not like, even if you had perfect enlightened leaders, they couldn't force the rest of us to grow up and become, you know, become love, to get rid of our beliefs, to let go of our fear. It doesn't happen that way. It's an individual thing. Everybody has only one person on this planet that they can control, and that's themselves. And that's the only person that they really should be trying to control, is themselves. And if they're successful with that, successful in growing up, then the people that run the banks and the government will take care of themselves. That will all just work out as the population deserves better, because it is better. So that's my I sound like I've heard that question before, right? I get a little excited with that one, but I hope that answers it.
I get excited about that question too, because I've always been a proponent of it starts with me, and you know, I have a hard enough time changing me and growing me without trying to impose it on others. So
yes. Gandhi said it all, actually. He said, you know, be the change you want to see in the world.
Yeah, lovely. So true. And thank you. Very much appreciated.
So, Tom, we're talking about living now in this probabilistic, not deterministic universe or reality, and that our intent can help guide these potential outcomes. When do we reach that tipping point in terms of a large enough proportion of participants focusing their will and directing their intent to have impact on the future direction that the reality can be shifted. And this can then apply towards the challenges that society faces: energy constraints, social strife, restrictions on freedoms or liberties, and other issues that people would want to be solved as long as they are participating in that, or at least alleviating and redirecting things based upon their intent. In your writings and in your prior discussions, especially using the double slit experiment, you've indicated that it would be necessary to observe and measure those changes. Is the same going to be true in this type of situation, to reinforce and communicate the changes in order to have a positive feedback come through?
Well, that's so many questions in a row. So let me start at the beginning. We can nudge and facilitate change. We can nudge it, we can facilitate it, we can improve the opportunities for change, and we can improve the probability of change with our collective intent. And the larger that collective is, as far as a percentage of the whole, the better. But we're just talking about change and nudging, okay, because we're still constrained to do that within the natural uncertainty of the problem. Okay, so we can't force people to grow up. It's not that if we all get together, if half of us get together, we can force the other half to change. We can't force anybody to change. Okay, these social problems won't go away until we, the people that create them, grow up. Now, however, given your premise that there's a lot of people, let's say, a large number of people employed in focusing intent, well, you don't get to the point where you understand what's going on enough to focus intent on a problem, looking for, compassion and love and solving these social problems and that sort of stuff. If we have that many people that are in this group that are focusing intent, that kind of implies that a whole lot of people have grown up. So in that sense, it's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy. If that many people grow up, can we make things better? Well, of course we can. But if you're talking about a smaller group, say, let's say 100,000 people, 100,000 people sounds like a big number, but it's a very small percentage of the 7 billion that are living on the planet. Yeah. So if 100,000 people do this, then they will nudge the whole a little bit, and they'll affect probabilities a little bit, so they can have, they can work toward world peace or, better government, things like that. They can nudge it a little, but they're not going to do, what shall I say, dramatic changes aren't going to take place, because that's not actually changing people. See, you can't make somebody change. All you can do is offer them an opportunity for them to change themselves. So what happens when you use your mind to try to, say, lower the crime rate, what you're doing is you're changing the probability of those people who are indecisive. They're saying, well, should I go out tonight and mug somebody so I can pay for my drugs next week? Or shall I just stay here and watch TV? You see, when you put that idea out that, don't go out and mug people, we don't want the crime, peace, love, all that sort of thing, then some of those people that were kind of on the fence with that will stay home and watch TV, or maybe take care of their children or do something productive instead of going out and mug. So suddenly you'll see this crime rate will maybe go down a little bit while those people are working on that. I think that used to be called the Maharishi effect, that you can actually affect big things like that. Well, it does work, but you haven't really changed those people. You see, all you've done is nudged them a little bit, changed the probabilities a little bit, and it shows up in the statistics. If they don't go out that evening, they might go out the next, unless you're still working on it. So if you want that lower crime rate to kind of stay there, then your 100,000 people have to stay there and keep trying to depress it, because these people have free will and you're not making them grow up. You're just modifying the probabilities, you see. Yeah. Now, you could use that will to kind of communicate with these people and try to counsel them, to a more productive lifestyle, and that would work a little. Some of them who are kind of on the fence of sees this life of crime, doesn't really, it doesn't pay very well. I'm still poor, I'm still this, I'm still that, and I've got all this downside that I might be caught and thrown in jail, and somebody may come after me and that sort of thing. And those people who are kind of on the fence, you might change the probability there, and they might decide to, I think I'll cut this out and, go to college or something, do something more useful. So you can make little changes, but again, you're not doing much but nudging probabilities that are kind of near the edge anyway. So
okay.
Unless you're planning to stay with it for the rest of time, for the rest of your life or something, it's going to be mostly temporary change, not permanent change.
No.
Permanent change only comes when the people decide to change themselves.
Yeah. An analogy that might work is I'm thinking in terms of starting a snowball rolling down a hill, and at the bottom of the hill is that peaceful, love, productive, supportive society, and trying to get the snowball rolling down.
Mm-hmm.
You need to pick up and collect more people in order to get that done.
Right. The way you do that is you produce, people have to start, be the change they'd like to see. People have to change, but you have to change in a way that helps other people change. In other words, you have to be the good example. You have to show where that goes, and that your life can go from struggle to joy. And if you can get that idea across, then you may affect hundreds, or thousands of others to live their lives differently. That's how I think the snowball goes. It's like it has to be viral. One person has to catch it from another. You have to kind of get the idea that, there's a better way. Look how these other people are getting by and how their life is compared to mine, and then help them on the path, but you can't fix it for them. Now, I have I kind of have an idea in the back of my mind of how this might play out and how we might actually affect that in kind of a long-term process, and kind of what has to happen first and what will happen second. But that's going to take some time. So maybe we can get to that to the end when we get through these questions, and we have some kind of bonus questions that pop up after we've asked all the ones that are on the board.
Okay. No, we'd appreciate that very much. Uranus, I think you had something else that you wanted to ask Tom in this topic area?
Yes, please. Tom, in one of your videos, you spoke about how to be or to respond to people experiencing mental sufferings such as depression and despair, but maybe this also might include fear. You described their state of mind as only being able to hold a very small picture, not being aware of different choices, and being stuck in their mental loops. How does attachment to a small picture foster entropy? And how do we respond, if at all, to such people? And how do we know the difference?
Okay. The people who are, say, depressed, we'll take them as a general group. People who are depressed see the world as a reflection of that depression. In other words, they're in this world, and in this world there's all kinds of things that are possible for them, but the only things that they really see, because that's what they focus on, are the things that are negative for them. It's all the bad stuff. Now, there's also good stuff in their reality. They just don't see it. They don't relate to it. And if you point that out to them, you say, yeah, well, look at this thing. This is pretty good. Look, your mother loves you. And they'll say, yeah, but, and then they'll list all the bad stuff. They're not really focused on that good thing. That means their reality now is shrinking. The stuff, they're not seeing the whole picture. Their reality is becoming a smaller and smaller reality that only contains the stuff that annoys them. It only contains the bad stuff for them. And the rest of reality has disappeared. They don't see it. It doesn't exist. They can't see anything but the bad stuff. So that means, unfortunately, they also have a very small opportunity to grow. It's very difficult to pull yourself up by your bootstraps when your reality is that small, because you have a small reality, you have a small decision space, you have small opportunities to do things that help move you toward love, because all of your world is just this bad stuff. Okay. Now that you would take the category of depressed and take that one, a subset of that, take it one level deeper, if you will, and that's the category of those that are suicidal.
Yeah.
Suicidal is like an advanced case of depression where your reality has shrunk even more. See, the depressed person has a big enough reality that they can see some function in the world that's working for them, like at least they have a job and they can pay the rent and they can get by. Yeah, life sucks, but I have this dog and I like my dog and my dog loves me and I have this job and all the rest of it isn't much good, but at least I've got this. With the person that's suicidal, they generally don't even have that. Their reality shrinks down even more. They're living in this little tiny space that is just painful to the point that they can't stand it.
Yeah.
And that's all they have in their reality. How do you help people like that? You help them by trying to open up their reality, by increasing the size of their picture. And the way you do that is first you have to start from where they are. You have to, if you communicate to anyone, you don't communicate to people successfully by telling them what the right answers are and how they should act and how they should be and that they're being ridiculous the way they are. That isn't communication. That's browbeating. That's trying to impose your view of the world onto them, and they will reject that. What you need to do is start where they are. Yes, I see what you mean, how life sucks for you. And once you get to where you're communicating with them, you can say, but look at this over here. Look at these people who care about you. You see, all these people really care about you. You're well loved by, list a couple of people and so on. And they'll go, oh yeah, but look at this terrible thing. And you can say, yeah, but look how big this nice thing is. And if you can just open their reality enough to let in something that is positive, that's a huge step for them. And then you open up, bring something else in that's positive. Well, I know your girlfriend just left you and you think, life isn't worth living, but there's lots of young ladies out there you may have a wonderful relationship with. Wouldn't you like to meet one? I happen to know of a young lady who thinks you're pretty nice, this sort of thing. Really? You do? Once you open up the possibilities, then the need for suicide or the depression starts to go away, because now their reality is big enough to include solutions, not just problems. So that's kind of the key. And the reason that it's a high entropy thing when these people are closed down is that, one, they can't grow, they don't have opportunity, so that prevents them from decreasing their entropy, but it also usually reacts badly, helps and nudges other people to make poor choices. So all the people around them tend to, act badly too. And by that, I mean, they get upset. They're fearful. Oh, this person, they're so depressed, I'm afraid they're going to commit suicide. And it's too bad. And people don't like them at work because they're so negative and all they can do is complain. And, the relationships are falling apart because, they're always miserable and it's no fun being around them. And you see, so the people who find it no fun to be around them, their entropy goes up because now they're fearful, they're upset, they can't live with this person anymore, they're heartbroken. So you create all this high entropy stuff just interacting with such people, because very few people can just look at them and say, well, that's just the way they are. That's where they are on their path. And I've tried, tried to open up their reality some, but this is just what they're doing. So, we need to respect them and deal with it in a positive way. Not many people do that. Most people wail and wring their hands and end up doing things that really adds to the problem, because that's not helpful for this person. Well, then this person looks around and says, well, look at all these people wailing and crying, and I'm the reason for it. And then they have even a lower opinion of themselves, you see.
Yeah.
Everybody would be better if I just wasn't here. So the whole thing just degenerates. It reinforces it, and it just degenerates because people react because of their own ego, you see.
Yeah.
So when everybody's having this ego reaction, it's just not helpful for anybody. There's nothing that breaks the process. Everything just kind of adds to the process, and it goes to hell in a handbasket because it all feeds The depressed person kind of makes other people unhappy, and the fact that they're unhappy makes the depressed person more depressed, and it doesn't go anywhere very productive.
I've worked with a few people that were suicidal, and I suggested to them what makes them think that they can escape this by committing suicide. And I think closing down the possibility that they will escape it opens up something else for them. But absolutely positively point out the positives, remind them. And it's very difficult to be with people like that. But I do support 100% what you're saying about meeting them where they are, and helping them one step at a time up, even if it's, did you enjoy the last breath?
Well, if you can do nothing more than meet them where they are with compassion, just I feel your pain, sort of thing, and actually mean it and feel it. If you can just do that, that can be helpful all by itself, because by then not only is their reality very small, but they're isolated. They've caused themselves to be very, very isolated, and just having another human being be compassionate is sometimes a very big plus. Oh, somebody cares about me.
Tom, what about you meet with someone in a compassionate manner? They're so attached to their little picture that they can't get out of it. Then what? I mean, is that just their choice? Is that something that another person can have no control over or try to influence? Is, at what point do you say this isn't going to work?
Well, you do what you can. You offer, and if it doesn't work the first time, you say, well, is there some way I could present this better? Did I not really show compassion, or was I just trying to manipulate? I want this person to not be this way, so I'm going to, if you're going to try to manipulate them, and you realize that's what you're doing, you're really trying to talk them out of it. Well, talking them out of it is trying to manipulate them, you see, and they get that, and they don't, the manipulation just goes on their pile of things that are negative. If it's true compassion, then it's just that you care about them. Just care about them. It's not, I want you to be different. See, that doesn't help. It's not that I want you to be different. Compassion isn't manipulative. It's just that I care about you.
Yes.
And here's why, and if that comes across, that generally does help, you see, because that's real. And they know the difference in a heartbeat between being manipulated and somebody's trying to talk them out of it or manipulate them, and somebody who just honestly cares about them. But when you honestly care about them, and you've done what you can do, and you've kind of checked yourself on where are you coming from, and is this really love and compassion, or is this manipulation?
Right.
And you've done the best you can do, then you have to respect that they are on their path, and that they have free will, and they need to make their own decisions. And if what they decide to do then is commit suicide, then that's what happens. And you have to accept that and go on. It's not your thing to fix other people, even though you look at them and you say, well, obviously this person has a lot to live for, and I need to fix them. That's the wrong approach. That just pushes them more. You have to have compassion. You have to love. And then you have to let them be. It's their thing, because death in the big picture is just not a big deal. Okay, this this experience packet ends, and then they go start another one. Maybe they'll do better the next time. Maybe they'll have a better understanding of what happened and why. And it may be ending this packet may be the appropriate thing for them to do. So you can't make that decision for them, you see.
Yeah.
That's their decision. Maybe this packet just isn't working out. Maybe in this packet, the throw of the dice on the way the genes went together turned out with such brain chemistry that it's very difficult for them to be anything other than depressed, you see. So it may be better, rather than struggling on with this defective system, just opt out and start over. And that's not necessarily an irrational, decision. So just because we look at it and don't see it that way, we see all the potential they have, then we want to control it. Try to help it, but don't force it. If that's what they want to do, then you have to accept that.
Well, this certainly goes back to being with people without expectations other than wishing them well, however that happens. And sometimes, people incarnate in such horrible conditions that, there but for the grace of God go I. So I very much appreciate your thoughts on this. It's very helpful. Thank you.
Yes, and one other point that you almost made there is that sometimes people incarnate with a mission to help those around them grow. It's not necessarily about them so much as it about you trying to deal with them and the things you might learn in that process. So it's, there's interaction goes both ways. It's not just them, but it's the whole interaction of them and everybody and thing that interacts with them is all part of this dance. And the dance needs to be compassionate and love-based and helpful and understanding and, that kind of thing. And if it is on all sides of all the people and all the connections, then you will end up getting the most benefit out of the whole thing. And whether that person commits suicide or not isn't the issue so much. It's, did the larger consciousness system take a step up because entropy was lowered because of everything that happened?
Well, this really touches my heart deeply, having been with children in undeveloped countries that have died. And I have felt that they were teaching all of us, and what a great gift they were giving us. So I appreciate your thoughts very much. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Okay, to wrap up this section on big and little toes, Keely would have one more question for you, Tom.
Hi, Tom.
Hello.
Considering fear, ego, and belief are the weakest intent, and the strongest intent being most clear and focused, would you speak of how intent can vary in its power to create a desired outcome, including the placebo effect, and how others' intents and well wishes and prayers may influence the individual intent?
Sure. First of all, I agree with you completely. It's very true that fear, ego, belief, expectations, needs, wants, desires, all that stuff represent the weakest kind of intent, and a clear, focused intent that carries a positive low entropy intent is the strongest. Also involved is the purpose of the intent. So you have an intent, but that intent has a purpose, has a quality, has a value, and that's also important. An intent that has a very positive low entropy value, purpose, quality to it is more powerful than one that, though it may be clear and focused, it's like the what is it, the secret or that sort of stuff. What I want, what I'm going to intend is that I get a new Mercedes Benz, or that I get a wealthier husband or a prettier girlfriend, and that's my intent. Well, that's a pretty low quality intent. Even if the person has been meditating for a decade and can focus their mind, that still doesn't move much because it's driven by ego. So there's a couple of different things going here. We talk about placebo effect. Placebo effect is a very good, shall we say, example of how intent modifies the probable future. The placebo effect is a well-known, and everybody's heard about it. Everybody knows that it's real. It's not just that people who get the sugar pill, even though they're told that this is wonderful new medicine, it's not that they just think they feel better. It's not psychosomatic. They actually get better. So you look at the people who heal and who don't heal, and the placebo effect is very real medicine. It does make people heal. It helps people get better. And how does that work? Well, if you help people get a positive intent toward the outcome, they will modify the probability of a positive outcome. They will modify the probability to be a positive outcome. The placebo effects works the same in a negative direction. If you encourage people to have a negative or fear-based intent about the outcome, that will encourage a negative and fear-based, outcome. It's just the way it works. That's why studies that show that bedside manner is an important component of medicine. There's been some number of studies that show that the doctors who spend time with their patients, who are caring for their patients, rather than the doctors who are just seeing how much money they can make by how many patients they can run through the process. And you kind of feel like a cow in the cattle pen when you go through their process. They find that the doctor with good bedside manner has better statistics as far as his ability to heal and help people get well. That's because that negative intent helps people not, end up with a positive outcome. So anyway, the placebo effect modifies probable future, modifies reality. And that works on, a lot of things. We know that from studies go back into the 50s, 1955 or 6 or something. We had Norman Vincent Peale, right, with the power of positive thinking. I mean, it's the same sort of thing. We have The Secret. I can't really remember the other name that it's called, but anyway, this idea is to get what you want by programming the universe. Well, it has nothing to do with the universe. It has to do with consciousness, and you can modify reality with your intent. But if your intent is working at odds with the larger consciousness system, then it's just not going to work too well. So if what you're trying to do is aggrandize your ego rather than be helpful to someone, then it is a poor system and doesn't work so well. Does that help answer your question, Keely?
Yes, it does. That makes it a lot clearer. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
We are speaking with Tom Campbell. Please help support him by visiting his websites, mybigtoe.com and mbtevents.com. Please consider purchasing a copy of his book, My Big Toe, though a Google Books copy is available for free. Alternately, you might attend one of his seminars or workshops. Expanding and growing consciousness about consciousness may help others to become open to the larger reality we are all a part of. The next topic of discussion will examine the area of free will's decision space. Uranus Rising will again begin our discussion with Tom.
Tom, I very much appreciated your thoughts on free will, that it's not about getting what we want, but rather it is about the freedom to choose and to make our decisions. Would you share with us your thoughts on free will, including what you describe as our decision space?
Yes, of course. Let's start with decision space. And well, let's back up maybe even one step earlier than that. Let's start with consciousness. Consciousness cannot exist without free will. Free will cannot exist without consciousness. Consciousness and free will are logically necessary for each other's existence. Okay, that takes a lot of words and a lot of pages to do that as a logical theorem and kind of prove it that's true. But it is a connected pair, like that, two sides of the same coin, you might say. So now let's talk about decision space. Decision space is all of those choices that you could make given a particular situation. So let's say somebody does something to you that you consider rude. Okay, now you have certain choices that you can make. Now, I don't mean that you can theoretically make. There's all sorts of things that you could theoretically make. There's maybe 100 choices that you could do theoretically, but only the ones that you actually can choose, the ones that your level of quality of your consciousness, or your amount of fear, your amount of ego, what choices are within your reach to make. All right, somebody says something to you that is upsetting. What can you do? You could turn around and walk away. That's choice one. You could get angry. You could say something back. You could get even. You could get physical. You might punch them, or any of those things. Or you might wonder why they're coming. Why are they coming from that? Why would they do that? Maybe I'm misunderstanding their intent, where they're coming from, and try to figure out why it is like that, or how is it that you upset them to the point that they are coming to you with this, and you might analyze it. There's all sorts of things you could do. Well, these are the choices in your decision space for that particular event, that particular happening. Now, free will is defined as your ability to choose one of those choices, one of those responses in your decision space. So if there's 10 things there that you could do, then you pick one of them. Now, growing up and raising the quality of your consciousness, or lowering the entropy of your consciousness, has to do with the quality of the decision you make. Does that decision, is that a low entropy or high entropy decision? Is that decision based on love, caring, compassion, or is that decision based on fear, ego, belief? You see, if it's based on fear, ego, belief, then that's a high entropy decision. That's a poor quality choice. So that's how we grow up. We have these interactions. We have free will. We make choices, and by our choices, we evolve the quality of our consciousness, or we de-evolve the quality of our consciousness. So that's kind of what's going on here, is that we have free will within this decision space. Now, as I describe decision space, you see that somebody who has a small decision space has a small reality. If you only have 10 choices of the ways you might react to that insult, then you have a much smaller reality than somebody that has 100 choices. It's all different sorts of things they could choose from. So you see, a small decision space is a small reality that you're living in. It's a small awareness of the situation, of yourself and of the other people. So free will is not the getting what you want. I had a person I was interviewing with some years back, and they gave this little example. They said, well, okay, little Susie Ann is sitting in her child seat in the back of the car. It has a little steering wheel attached to it. And her mom's driving the car. And Susie Ann has hold of the steering wheel, and she knows where she is. Let's say she's 2 or 3, and they're coming up to an intersection. And little Susie wants to go right because that's where the park is, or that's where the ice cream store is, or something like that. So little Susie grabs her steering wheel and turns it to the right real hard. But Mom turns to the left. And then they asked me, does little Susie have free will? And I said, of course she has free will. Free will doesn't mean that she gets to have her way, that reality must do what she wants. Free will means that she has a choice. She can fuss and cry because her mom went the way she didn't want. That's a choice. She can accept that choice. She can accept one of her choices, that she could accept that decision with her mom gracefully. Another would be that it would make her angry. Another would be that it would throw her a fit, or she could just hardly even notice and just go on turning her wheel. So these are all choices that she has, and she has free will to make those choices, whether to fuss and cry or accept Mom's decision. You see, that's her free will. It's not that, the car didn't go the way she wanted, therefore she doesn't have free will. Now, of course, this little story was just, a metaphor. And the metaphor was that we're all like little Susie. We're walking around in this world, and, we have things we have to do, and it's not our choice. We have to pay taxes. We have to do this. We have to go to work. We have to pay our bills. And we have all this stuff. We have advertisers tricking us into thinking we want stuff, and on and on and on. You can think about all the ways that we get pushed and nudged and shoved this way and that. And people say, well, that just shows you we don't have free will. You know, we're just, like Pavlov's dogs, we're just here responding to the stuff that pushes us this way and that. We can't have it the way we want it. Well, that's not what free will is all about. Free will is about making choices. If you get arrested and convicted and put in jail, your decision space changes. You can no longer decide to go home to mama's on Thanksgiving. You can't you can't go where you want to go. You're restricted. You have constraints. But that doesn't make you not have free will. You still have things that you can decide. How you act, how you plan to act in the future, what you're going to do in there with your time. All of those things are in your decision space. Your decision space just changed. It no longer includes going to mama's on Thanksgiving. So that's the nature of free will. Obviously, if you don't have free will, then this whole consciousness thing doesn't make any sense, because how could you be conscious without free will? What would you do if you can't make a decision? If you can't make a choice, then what is consciousness? Okay, and on the other hand, if you are conscious and you have no free will, but let's say you have free will and you can choose things, but you're unconscious, well, how can you choose if you're unconscious? See what I mean?
Yeah,
you just have to have, they both go together. So
yes.
if you believe that we're conscious, then you also have to give us that free will in order for that consciousness to function. It can't function without free will. So that's kind of the way that that free will things work. You hear lots and lots of people, scientists particularly, who are convinced that we live in a deterministic reality because they've kind of bought Newton's idea that our universe and everything in it is all according to clockwork. They look at everything, things roll downhill not because they have free will. That's true, but we're not things rolling down free will. We are sentient beings, and we have choices, and those choices make a difference. The person you are now is basically the sum of all the choices that you've ever made. That's pretty much is why you are the way you are. It's those choices. And we do have the free will to choose among the choices in our decision space.
And it sounds like as our consciousness matures and expands, so does our decision space and the ability to exercise our free will within that.
Exactly. The size of your reality is related to the size of your decision space. If your decision space is very small, your reality is very small. There's just not much you can do. That's what happens to those people we talked about who are suicidal. It gets down to the point there's only one decision they can make. And that's either to kill themselves or not kill themselves. It's the only thing in their decision space. It's like nothing else is a choice that they can make. That's it. That's the one choice they have left. So if you have a big decision space, you live in a big reality.
Yeah.
You have a larger awareness. All that goes together. We all live in our own personal reality. Reality is it's a multiplayer game, but your reality is personal. And the size of that reality and the size of your awareness is all personal.
But this is really wonderful. It provides so many opportunities, and also would be a wonderful incentive to explore and expand our consciousness, because it opens up so many possibilities.
Yes, once you really understand how the game works, and all of the things we've been talking about so far have all been things that are logically derived from the fundamental understanding of reality. In other words, there's just two assumptions in this theory. One of them is that consciousness exists. The other is that evolution exists. And from that, we get everything else, including better physics and a better science. It solves a lot of those unanswered questions in science, and it also derives kind of the metaphysics that we've been talking about, like free will, and it solves problems all over. Solves problems of theology as well. So it's neat that this all is a logical scientific derivation. And it's not just that we're a couple of metaphysicians, out speculating on the way things might be, but this is actually a scientific, logical conclusion about the nature of reality. That kind of puts it in a little different perspective. And that is neat, and it is empowering, because once you understand how it works, then, who wouldn't want a larger decision space? Who wouldn't care about the quality of their decisions? Suddenly things make sense, and you realize which way is up, and you can start making, some progress to move in that direction. Yeah, I agree with you. It's wonderful.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Tom. Lovely.
Tom, in your New York MBT Master Seminar, which was one of the videos that I watched over on YouTube, you indicated that our physical material reality, our PMR, must be homogeneous and isotropic for our rule set to work, physics, calculus, etc. Have you, in your experiences, transitioned to other PMRs beyond the commonly experienced one that the vast majority of humans understand and know, where the rule sets are constrained differently?
Yes, I have. I have explored dozens of different reality frames. All of the realities are virtual realities, including our physical reality is a virtual reality. And virtual realities typically have a little different outcomes. They're not just the same as this, but that difference generally has more to do with evolution than it does with rule sets. And I'll explain that. Rule sets don't seem to vary very dramatically. And the reason for that is we have this virtual reality. Virtual reality, you can think of it as like a computer simulation. Okay. And to be stable, to have a stable outcome in this simulation requires a rule set to be kind of in a certain way, and in physics, what they talk about is that there is like a dozen or so constants or so that if any of them changed by even 0.5%, the world would become unstable. Things wouldn't work. It wouldn't end up in this stable universe. So that's kind of the constraint on producing a virtual reality that is tight enough, has a tight enough rule set to call it physical reality. Your dreaming reality is also a virtual reality, but it doesn't have a tight rule set, so we don't call that a physical reality. It has a much more open rule set. So in your dreams, you can fly, you can teleport, you can do all sorts of things in your dreams that you can't do here because those are allowed in the dream reality rule set, but not allowed in this physical reality rule set. So those virtual realities that have more constrained rule sets, we call them physical realities, although they're really not any different fundamentally than any reality. All realities are virtual. Consciousness is the only thing that's fundamental. All other experiential realities, that means a reality in which you can experience in, they're all virtual. So to get a virtual reality that makes sense, that doesn't fly apart, that doesn't eventually, I don't know, wish we say, I guess fly apart's the thing. It doesn't disintegrate. You have to have rules that converge to a stable situation, a stable simulation, a stable game, if you will. Now, it doesn't have to be stable forever, but it has to be stable long enough that it makes a good classroom, a good learning lab. Like this universe we're in isn't going to be stable forever because our rule set says that if we wait long enough, there won't be anything in this universe except a kind of a homogeneous hydrogen gas, because that's the second law of thermodynamics, talks about how entropy in this virtual reality must, in any event, must either be equal to zero or increase. In other words, the energy of the universe has to wind down just like a spring. It's like friction eventually eats away the energy. For the same reason we can't have a machine that that runs on energy that it creates. That sort of thing is just not allowed. There's always something that drains energy out of the system. Anyway, so to get a reality that is stable long enough takes very precise set of rules that work together in a way to produce this thing, and they don't vary a whole lot. So I've been in a lot of different physical realities. Most of them have rule sets that are similar. Some are a little different, but I'd say they're not dramatically different. They're different in the details. But now look at the evolution. Evolution has a pretty good amount of randomness in it. The choices that one has in evolving are many. It could have evolved this way, or it could have evolved that way. That fish could have grown legs and walked out on land because there was more food on land. It could have done it this way, or it could have done it that way. We might have, skipped whole sets of critters that we have now just because random things, the way the rule set created the environment and the heat and the atmosphere and all this stuff, which has a lot of randomness in it, created what we've got here. So you take another system, or even take this system, if you could start it over, let's go back to, 500 million years ago or something, to where we were just hadn't crawled out of the sea yet. Then what would have evolved might be differently if you just started that over and let it go again. Just the statistics of it might produce a different result. It wouldn't have to be the same result we have. This thing happened because of the last thing that happened, which happened because of the last thing that happened. And if any of that had changed, the whole chain would have been different. So yes, we have different kinds of beings, if you will, with different kinds of physical arrangements, but that's evolution, which is sometimes dramatically different from place to place. The degree to which consciousness has evolved in these places can be dramatically different from place to place, but the fundamental rule set is generally not that different.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. Jumping back, the free will awareness unit and/or the individuated unit of consciousness are constrained by the virtual body and brain in their perceptions of these constraints. So if and when little c consciousness moves beyond the PMR and NPMR into the larger superset, can it or does it join with and interact with the large c consciousness, or is it just other little c consciousness?
Oh, it joins and interacts with the large c consciousness, with the larger consciousness system. Okay, once it leaves the physical virtual reality, PMR, our universe, once it leaves that data stream, it's no longer constrained by the PMR rule set, by that data stream's rule set. It is now constrained by the rule set of the VR that it is in. So let's say you get out of this physical reality, go to a different one, or go to a reality that's not so constrained to seem physical. It just seems more like a dream reality, like the out-of-body reality. You get into that. Now you have to abide by the rules of that reality, of the out-of-body reality. There's certain kinds of rules. In a dream reality, there's certain kind of rules, and you abide by those. So you only have to abide by this physical virtual reality when you are in its data stream, when you are receiving the data that defines this reality, because indeed this physical reality doesn't exist. It's just information that you are interpreting. So you switch data streams and you get into a different data stream, and now you have to interpret, you have that one has its own constraints by which you must interpret within those constraints. So that's how that works.
Okay. No, that's terrific. Thank you. That clarifies those questions that have been running around inside my brain, and certainly I hope it helps other people. To further the conversation in this topic area, we're now going to turn back over to Chipper Dog.
Tom, I was just listening to that. One of the questions that I had, you said that consciousness is fundamental and that the physical relates to the virtual reality that it inhabits, if I'm not paraphrasing too absurdly. And if the physical is manifestation of aggregated energetic interactions, to what would metaphysical relate?
Okay. If the physical is a manifestation of aggregated energetic actions is a little problematically. It's not problematical for me. It is not a manifestation of aggregated energetic interactions. It's a computed simulation wherein interacting individuated units of consciousness, IUOCs, make choices within the constraints of a rule set.
Right.
Okay. The interplay of these interactive multiplayer choices constrained by the rule set determines what happens next. You see? So it's not that there's really a bunch of aggregated energetic interactions going on, and then in metaphysics, what kind of interactions go on. It's not like that. The metaphysical works the same way. Only consciousness is fundamental. All else is virtual. So experiential in the dream reality, which is a virtual reality, you experience in the dream reality. You have experiences. So that's what I mean by an experiential reality, where you have choices. Okay. So it really doesn't matter where you are, whether it's metaphysical in the sense of out of body or dreams or something that is outside of what we call physical. I guess that's what makes it metaphysical, sort of like physical, but not in the physical reality.
Yeah.
If you get into those kinds of a reality, it works exactly the same way. All virtual realities are kind of the same thing. So it's not aggregated energetic things. It's really choices within the constraints of a rule set. Okay. And yeah, that's really what's going on. And you do that in all different kinds of virtual realities. You make choices according to the rule set of that particular virtual reality.
Okay. Well, that clarifies. Suppose someone has two postulates: an unwavering respect for the integrity of other individuals and a giving of freedom to others to be who they will, along with a taking of that same freedom for oneself. Further, suppose that one sees and feels a small yet growing interrelatedness between oneself and others. How can that understanding of interrelatedness be shared, and when does that desire to share impact on another's integrity and need to do it on their own? How can that delicate balance be reconciled and maintained?
Yes, I understand kind of your concern there, because we're supposed to let everybody grow in their own way, yet we're supposed to help them. And how does that work? Well, all we can offer another is opportunity. We can share a bigger picture, but they have to recognize that, bigger picture, have to recognize that opportunity. They have to grab that opportunity. Then they have to succeed in exploiting that opportunity entirely on their own. But we can help them find that opportunity for growth, an opportunity for learning. And the primary way that we can do that is by offering them, a bigger picture. We can, just like we talked about with the depressed and the other people, we can pry their reality open a little if we start from where they are, and then just one tiny step at a time, show them that perhaps there's something bigger. There's more decisions that they have in that decision space. We can pry the reality open a little. And one of the ways you allow people to do that isn't by lecturing them or writing a book or putting movies on YouTube. One of the ways you do that is just by giving them a safe, secure environment where they can feel free to be themselves, to take chances, to try something new. You see?
Yeah.
So if you want to really help somebody grow and give them opportunities to be, sometimes the best thing you can do is provide them an environment where it's safe to stretch out, where it's safe to change, because most people are afraid of change. Again, it's that herd mentality, fear of things being different and uncertainty. If I change, then what's going to happen? What am I going to be? I'm kind of safe here because I've been this way all along, and I kind of can get by this way. And if I change, is that going to lead somewhere, bad? I'm going to make a fool of myself. What's going on? Well, if you put them in a place that's so safe and so secure because you care about them, you love them, you're not going to judge them.
Right.
You're not going to do those things that are going to make them feel bad. Now they have the kind of the strength, if you will, to reach out and try some of these things. So that's kind of how you can do it. You can't ever teach anybody or explain things. You can tell people there's a larger reality out there, and your part in this reality is to become love, and you can tell them that. But if they're not ready for it, and if that just doesn't compute with them, then it doesn't do anything, except perhaps add the thought in their mind someplace that one day in the future might actually germinate,
right,
and help them see something. But as far as kind of shaking them and say, grow up, you need to let go of the fear, all that does is frighten them, and is counterproductive. So there is no way really to force somebody to go in a way that's not really good for them. Right. Although it does bring up one other thing. We've talked about healing and changing probable future. And it is possible to use your intent to manipulate probable future in such a way that it what shall we say, is overrunning the free will of other people. What about the person who needs that illness in order to learn a lesson? And if you heal them, you take that opportunity away from them, you see?
Yeah.
So you have to also be concerned that if you do get to the point that your intent is clear and focused enough to actually modify probable future in a significant way, you have to realize that it's really best if you don't do that, except in very, very, special cases.
Yeah.
So in general, I found out that the people who have the most ability to modify the future are the people who actually use that ability the least. The people who are just beginning and just have a little bit of ability to do those sorts of things, they may do all kinds of things, but then they really can't affect it all that much either. So it tends to be kind of self-correcting.
Okay. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Our next topic area will be framed by Love That Consciousness. And this cluster of questions, again, we turn to Uranus Rising to lead us off. Uranus?
Thank you, Mac. You wrote in My Big Toe that all sentient entities existing upon the Earth, Team Earth, are a collective dance of creative interaction. That our local reality is a shared reality that represents a vector sum of all the free will choices of all the interacting players. How the virtual ball bounces and the cookie crumbles is a result of a shared effort. Then you wrote that each of us are an important part of and affects the whole, all of Team Earth, succeeds or fails together. Would you please elaborate on this in regards to what may seem like a large variance in consciousness and humanity, as well as what do you mean by success or failure?
Okay. Well, there is a large variance in consciousness within humanity, but I wouldn't want to limit it just to humanity. It's bigger than humanity and includes all the critters as well. It includes all sentient entities. All conscious beings, so it's not just humanity. It's all the beings on, on this planet. If we're just talking about, what happens on this planet, then it would be all the conscious beings on this planet are all doing similar things in the sense that they're all trying to improve the quality of their consciousness. It's all opportunity to grow. Okay, there's just different sized decision spaces, if you will. Some of us have much bigger decision spaces than others. Obviously people who have pets such as dogs and cats, no, those critters are conscious. They have personalities, they think into the future, they anticipate, they have ego, they have an ability to love, they have all the attributes that, are conscious, and that they as well contribute to this. They're part of team. They're part of, our team. Just, they're not to be left out. So it's not only the variances among humans that are wide, but, Team Earth is, all conscious entities. Okay. So, again, what you see is what we are. When I say it's a vector sum of everything that we are, what you see is what we are. How do we interact? See, it's about interaction. Consciousness is about data, information, right? It's an information system.
Mm-hmm.
What does information system do? Well, it exchanges information. It communicates. And what does that mean? Well, then it's about community. It's about relationship. It's about interaction. So all of the interactions we have, whether it's the way we treat, the critters, not only our pets, but, the critters worldwide, all kinds of critters, whether they're, bumblebees or whatever else, polar bears, how do we treat the critters is all part of what makes this reality what it is. And the fact that we're in this school that is there for our learning to evolve the quality of our consciousness. And in this school, we'd like to think that we're in graduate school, but we're more like we're in daycare. You see, there's lots of fear. And from fear, you derive ego and belief and wants, needs, desires, expectations. All that stuff derives out of fear. Fear is the opposite of love. So when we look around, we watch the news, and we kind of see what's going on out here in the world, and we say, wow, what a terrible place to live. All this meanness, all this fear, all the people trying to grab each other's stuff and trick each other out of their money. And, this isn't very nice, but that's us. That's the way we are. We have a lot of fear. We have a lot of then ego and beliefs and so on that make us act like that. And our institutions and our governments just reflect we the people. They reflect us. They're part of us too. So, yes, it is a team Earth. We're all here, and we all kind of rise and fall together because this fear, we all have to live with it. Just because, 95% of the population is very fear-based and ego-based and full of beliefs and that sort of thing. Well, we all live here. It affects all of us. And on the other hand, just because some of us are, full of love and caring and so on, that you have Mother Teresa's and Gandhi's and, Martin Luther King's and you finally get rid of apartheid down in South Africa, have all this. Well, that all affects us too. There's good things going on there. We're the sum of all of it. So that's that's kind of what I meant by those sayings, is that we have to take responsibility, I guess is what it is. You just can't look out there and say, well, this would be a nice place if you would just change, your attitude, if you would just, fix the way you look at things, if you bankers would just be kind instead of, greedy, if you politicians would stop trying to manipulate us with fear, this would be a wonderful place. Well, we can't push that responsibility off onto other people. We're all in this thing together. We're all a part of it. And if we do our little individual part, then it will get better. So if you just do your part and you grow your quality of consciousness, you're part of the whole. So the whole gets a little better because the whole is the sum of all the pieces, and you're a piece. So as you get just a tad better, the whole just got a tad better, you see? And it just takes enough of us getting a tad better that we won't have this world that we've created now. We'll have a much better place.
Mm-hmm. So the success is a more loving, cooperative community of all sentient beings.
Yes, exactly. And I would, since I'm a scientist, I put this in technical terms, success is judged in the big picture, not in the little picture.
Yeah.
Success doesn't mean that everybody has a Mercedes-Benz in their garage. That's not success. Success is that we have lowered the entropy of the larger consciousness system. Or if we're just talking about this planet, we've lowered the entropy of this planet. And you can't do that while you're out, slaughtering critters, right? Because they're part of the planet. Or, burning rainforests, You have to look at the whole thing. And it's a success when the whole thing ends up with a higher quality of existence, where all the consciousness on the planet is a little higher quality of consciousness. And every time one of us takes one step, even a small one, in that direction, well, the whole thing just got a little boost. And every time one of us de-evolves by doing some kind of mean thing that creates higher entropy, we've just lost that little bit as a whole. So that's really what I meant. Yes, success has to be defined in terms of the big picture, not the little picture. You know, sometimes people think success is how much money do you have, how much beer can you drink, how powerful and what kind of influence you have. Or even how much food you have to eat. That's not success. Success is basically growing up in the larger picture.
Yeah. But Tom, this leads me to wonder, why do we have so much fear and ego here?
Well, like I say, this is a daycare. This is daycare for budding units of consciousness, and that's just the way we are. That's where we are on our evolutionary path. I'd be like the fish saying, "Well, how come everybody lives in the sea? You know, why is there nothing but but plants out there? How come we all live in the sea? Just plants and insects. You know, those insects would be tasty. We need to figure out a way to get out of here." Well, that's just where they were in evolution. You know, so it's a big process, and the process is open-ended. See, evolution doesn't have a goal or an endpoint. Evolution just happens, and it happens in consciousness because of the choices we make. And it could go this way or it could go that way. You know, it's a very open-ended process that never ends. You know, are we as human beings in these physical bodies, if you just look at the physical process, you know, we're at the end of our evolutionary, chain? Well, no, of course not. You know, we're still changing. Things are going on, and we'll keep changing forever. There's no end to it because things change. There's always some way that we could adapt better, and those changes will keep moving along. Sometimes, the fish crawled out onto the land so they could eat bugs and other things, leaves and things that were there. At the same time, some of the mammals went back into the sea. That's why dolphins have hands, in their flippers. If you look at the bones in their flippers, they have fingers.
Yeah.
See, that's why they're mammals. So they went up onto the land and then they went back into the sea. So evolution can go any sort of way. It's just an adaptation to what happens to be around. Well, now in consciousness system, it's a information system. It's not a physical system, so it's not survival and procreation. It's lower entropy. In an information system, it's you want to get rid of randomness and build content, you see. You're creating valuable information. And valuable information, is structure inside of an information system. You build useful structure that helps. What helps? Well, help is defined by entropy in an information system. Is it more ordered or is it more disordered? Is it tearing apart and working more poorly, not cooperating with itself, not growing, not becoming more? Or is it disintegrating? You see, disintegration is higher entropy. Pulling together is lower entropy. Consciousness is like a society. It's not just a big monolithic lump. It's zillions of these little individuated units of consciousness. So it's all about the quality of interaction, the quality of relationship is what's driving this. And things that are fear-based, relationship and interaction gets pulled apart. It's divisive. It's destructive. Whereas love, you see, is pulling together. It's helpful. It's encouraging. So that's why you have this kind of love versus fear. And that's why consciousness is related, entropy is related to love, because a low entropy consciousness is defined as love. So the low entropy consciousness means that all of these interacting individuated units of consciousness are interacting in a way that's good for them, profitable, constructive. You see, supportive, that's low entropy. Whereas, the fear part, it's like, look out for number one, I'm going to grab mine and the hell with you, that tears apart, because then somebody else sees that you've got it, then they want to take it away from you, and then you got to make sure they can't. And, we end up with a place like what we live in. You see, that's the high entropy side. Well, here we are doing the best we can with what we've got, and we're all on this ship together, and we kind of rise and fall together because that's the nature of the system. And we're at a point in our evolution here that is full of fear. We're mostly fear-based, ego-based, belief-based. That's kind of the way we are. So what we get is what that produces.
Yeah. But like you say, we have free will and decision space.
Right. And we have the ability to do better.
Yes. Much, much better.
Mm-hmm.
Also, I was fascinated to read about your explanation of our individual projected consciousness fragments, their totality as the oversoul, and past fragments projected into the physical material reality. To me, it seemed a much fuller, more encompassing definition than just past lives in a linear timeline. Could you expand on that for us in the light of the bigger picture?
Okay, I will. I'm not sure I understand your question, but let me just try, and you can help me. You can help me if I'm off some.
Okay. All right.
We do have this bigger picture, and as I said, we have the probable future, we have the present, where the rubber meets the road, all the decisions, all the choices are made in the present, and then we have these past databases. Mm-hmm. And the way it works is that we need to reincarnate through this many, many times because, as everybody knows, lowering your entropy, becoming love, getting rid of fear and ego is not an easy thing to do because it's not an intellectual process. It has to have change at the being level. And change at the being level isn't a fast process. So it's something you wouldn't make a whole lot of progress in just one experience packet. In fact, eventually in our experience packet, we get to the point where we've been there, done that, have that attitude. We kind of get trapped in our beliefs and expectations and the way we think the world works. And our rate of growth tends to slow down. So what would happen if we didn't start over every so often is we'd kind of get dead end and, paint ourselves into a corner, sort of, with our all knowing, we know it all kind of an attitude. And then the progress would be very, very slow. So the system found this out and says, well, what we need to do is every so often just kind of push the reset button on that individual and let them start again because they get trapped. They trap themselves in their own beliefs, and then it's hard to get going again. Once you're trapped in a belief, it's a lot more difficult breaking out of that belief than it is starting over without the belief. So we need to go in cycles. We need to do this. But learning, you see, is cumulative. Learning's cumulative. You can't go on to the 200 level classes until you've done the 100 level classes. It's that sort of thing because the 100 level classes prepare you to understand the 200 level classes. So learning has to be cumulative. And the reason that we do it cumulatively, kind of linearly one after another, is that let's say here would be a good comparison. Let's say that you could duplicate yourself and send 10 of your duplicate selves all, to high school. Well, you'd have 10 individuals that all went up through high school. All right. Now, of course, they'd all have a little different experiences and they all go to different high schools. So you'd have 10 experiences up to high school. Or you could have one person who goes to high school and then next they go to college. And next they go to graduate school, and then next they go to a job, you see, and they do that 10 times. So let's say they have 10 cycles instead of 10 iterative, accumulative cycles as opposed to 10 instances of the same thing. Well, that's why we have to do this kind of serial learning because learning is a cumulative process, and it's a lot more efficient to learn more after, to learn more about a subject after you've already learned something about it. It's like learning knowledge. Knowledge enables you to go on and find more knowledge. Whereas if you haven't found knowledge A, you can't get the knowledge B. If you don't have understanding or concept A, you can't get the concept B. So we do have kind of it doesn't have to be linear. You're right about that. You can have it's not that unusual to have a person that might have, 2 or 3 incarnations, even at the same time, or in different reality frames. You can do that, but it's more limited in the sense that if you parallel process too much, you end up, wasting resources of the larger consciousness system, because that's like having 10 of you go to high school. You end up with 10 variations of the same thing, as opposed to one going through 10 iterations of learning. That's more effective. So you can parallel process, and sometimes there's good reasons for it. Sometimes you need to interact with something from a couple of different perspectives. So you, the father, may be the same entity as your son, you see, because seeing the world from both sides might be very profitable for you because of whatever issues you might have. So yes, it isn't that it has to be lockstep, serial process, but the parallel processing tends to be smaller and tends to be kind of in the margin on special cases where it belongs. But now we have these databases, and in these databases we can go anytime and access that data. So we can go back to the past and look and see what happens. We can learn from it. We can do what ifs, what if Adolf Hitler had won World War II? What would it be like now? Where would that have taken us? What if I hadn't forgotten my anniversary, 3 years in a row? Where would I be now? You can do these.
This is why we don't necessarily see future lives then. Everybody talks about their past life, but
the future life is only a probability.
Yeah.
You see, it's not a done deal. The future life depends on what we, how we modify. When we modify and make choices here, we rearrange the probabilities. Oh, we choose to not slap that person that annoyed us, but rather to try to discover why it is we're so annoying. Why we bring that out in them. Why they do that. Is there any way we can help them or help solve the problem? If we take that attitude rather than blowing up and starting a fight, then we've changed future probabilities. Because had we blown up and started a fight, the next 10 minutes, which is in the future, will be different than if we do something else, you see? So as we make choices, we modify what happens and what our choices are and what our opportunities are. All our opportunities will change based on the decisions we make. So that's why I say we here in this reality have created it, because we've made all these choices. And here we are, it's led us to where we are now.
That makes so much sense. Oh, amazing. I have another question for you, Tom. In your trilogy, you wrote that the optimal result of consciousness is love-like. But as we spoke about earlier, the problems of words, the word love is something we might be confused about. Some people think it's romance or dependency upon others or possession or even helping others. Would you define love from that bigger, more mature, responsible perspective?
Well, sure. That's just one of my favorite topics, right? I mean, love is the core thing here.
Yeah.
So let me first say that all love is non-conditional. You've heard of non-conditional love, and then there's that other love, right? Well, that other love is really not love. If they're conditions, it's not love. Love is not earned. It's given away. Consequently, love is not temporary. It can't be taken back. It's given away. Now, trust, on the other hand, is earned. Like is earned. By like, I mean, whether someone likes you or not. You have to earn that. Friendship is earned, but love is given away. We tend to confuse love and need. Most of us don't really fall in love, although we say that. We fall in need. We find somebody who satisfies our needs, and we satisfy their needs. And if enough needs are mutually satisfied, then we say we're in love, you see. But there are conditions, right? I'm only going to, be with you, love you, as long as you solve my needs. And, you're only be with me as long as I satisfy your needs. And basically, it's a mutual need satisfaction arrangement, and that's not love. Let's see. as we grow up, and when I say grow up, I don't mean getting older. As we increase the quality of our consciousness, we grow our capacity for love. We all don't have the same capacity for love because we all don't have the same decision space. You know, some of us just have more decisions we can make than others, more space that we can evolve into than others. For most of us, a state of love occurs naturally as entropy is reduced. That means as fear is reduced, as you get rid of ego and expectations and beliefs, you just automatically become more love. And it's not that you become loving. That's kind of an intellectual space, loving. It's you become love. Okay. Here's a question I get a lot. They say, well, becoming love, doesn't that make you vulnerable and powerless? You know, you become a doormat, right? When it's all about love, you need that ego to protect yourself. Well, that is not right. Love gives without the thought of getting in return. That does not force you to be weak, a doormat or a pushover. It makes you whole, it makes you valuable. It connects you in a very positive way with other people. It gives you purpose beyond the care and feeding of your ego. It gives you credibility and earns trust, which gives you the power to influence, to help, to be useful. Okay, so there's no imperative in this philosophy to be a pacifist. There is imperative to respect the free will of others, to always act with good intent, fearless and no ego. However, if others do not respect your free will or the free will of those under your protection, say your children, you may resist, or if necessary, you may fight back. It's with caring about others, you gain real power, satisfaction, and growth rather than the what we say temporary, empty, and barren power of dominance and force. So that's kind of the thing about love. Now, what we're doing here in this reality frame, I keep saying growing up, whatever, but basically here's our situation. Stuff happens, we deal with it. That's it. That's what happens here in this school. Stuff happens, we deal with it. And how we deal with it is making choices. Those choices are a reflection of our intent. You have to have an intention before you actually have an action. And how that intent plays out then, how we have that intent and make those choices is either based on a caring, a love, a lowering entropy, or it's based on fear, ego, beliefs, that kind of stuff. And so we pull ourselves up by our bootstraps by, doing exercises, if you will. And our exercises are exercises in making choices. In stuff happens, we deal with it. So the stuff that happens doesn't have to be nice. It doesn't have to make us feel good. It doesn't have to be painless. It just has to be stuff that challenges us to make decisions that help us grow. That's the point.
Wow. And maybe we can make our decisions to love and joy and stop all the suffering we think we are experiencing. So thank you for that. Yeah, yes. Thank you.
Returning to your New York MBT seminar again, Tom, you presented on a slide, love is defined as the fundamental expression of low entropy consciousness. If low entropy is low disorder, how does that extend to love as that fundamental expression? Or stated another way, why isn't low entropy consciousness just low entropy consciousness?
Right. What makes low entropy consciousness love?
Yes.
Okay. Recall that consciousness is about relationship. Okay. Consciousness, just like things that evolved in the physical world found that it was lower entropy or more survivable, if you will, to evolve structures that were more complex. So you had single cell things that became multi-celled things, and eventually those multi-celled things had more multi-cells that specialized, and you had the locomotion part and the digestion part and the, so on. Well, consciousness does the same sort of thing, because in order to evolve, it needed to create more information, and you do that with more complexity and more structure creates the information. as opposed to randomness, which has no information.
Mm-hmm.
And in that process, then you have these individual units of consciousness. And what consciousness does, because it's information, it shares information, it communicates. That brings us up to a community, if you will. Interaction is the key. Consciousness interacts. It's like a communication device. So if you have community, social interaction, relationship, now let's look at why low entropy is the same as love. Let's take two groups. One group of conscious beings, we'll say group A, they interact with love. Okay, now that means that they help each other. Well, let's make this a little more detailed. Let's say that group of the group of entities, group A, let's say there's 10,000 of them. We put them in an environment with fixed resources. Okay, so they have a rule set and fixed resources to deal with. And then we let them go, and we come back 20 years later and see, what's happened to them. Well, all their decisions are based on love. So if somebody discovers something useful, he shares it with all of them. If somebody needs help or is having a problem, others try to support and help them solve it. Let's see, an invention, if somebody has an invention that helps them do whatever they have to do, they share it. So it's that kind of thing. It's a very supportive, caring, we all try to help each other, sort of, like a big happy family. Okay, so that's that 10,000. And we can imagine, given the certain amount of resources, what that would look like 10,000 people some 20 years later. Well, now let's take group B. And group B will be the identical 10,000 people, but in this time we're going to make them all based on fear. And we're going to put them in the same environment with the same resources, and we're going to let them go for 20 years and see what happens to them. Well, now in that environment, it's what about me? Where's mine? Gimme, grab. It's going to be about, because they're in fear. They're afraid somebody else is going to get something they don't have. They're going to be afraid that somebody else is going to take their stuff away. So they have to protect it. So what then they're going to do is get together and have little mutual protection pacts. So this group then will kind of protect their stuff from this other group. And then the two groups will, of course, have wars with each other so that they can get each other's stuff and so on. After a while, what are you going to have? You're going to have probably 2 or 3% of the entities controlling 95% of the stuff, of the resources, and all the rest will be, struggling to get by and being manipulated and controlled and abused by the 5%. So that's the resources will just kind of lump up, because that's the way it is in a competitive society. Somebody wins, somebody loses, and the winners get more powerful, so they become bigger winners. And that's the way it'll work. Now look at those two and see how they come up. So one of them is a high entropy and one's low entropy, and it's obvious which is which. The low entropy system is the one that creates order. It creates, it's constructive. That's what low entropy means. It means structure, order, building. And high entropy means disintegrating, pulling apart. What can we say? More randomness, so it disintegrates, like somebody gets something and somebody else tries to rip it off, tries to take it. So you can't build anything. If you tried to build something, the only way you can build it is if you protect it. Okay, and if you protect it, now you only do that by violence, keeping the other people who want it away from it. That's why you build up into these kind of nation states, if you will, or groups of self-protection. So, it's obvious that low entropy goes with love. Love is a building thing and is low entropy, and the high entropy is related to fear. So that's how you make that connection between how is it that low entropy consciousness is associated with love and high entropy consciousness is associated with fear. It's because consciousness is really about interaction, community, relationship, those sorts of things. And when it comes to relationship and social interaction, there's nothing more constructive and more building and more coherent than interactions based on love. And there's nothing more disintegrating and dissolving and pulling apart and useless, I guess, is rather than useful, than relationships based on fear. So that's how that low entropy consciousness is love and high entropy consciousness is fear thing kind of works out. That's the logic for it.
Okay. No, I appreciate that very much. It makes it very clear and certainly provides a lot of support that the fear and greed, those very personal, internal emotions and reactions to others are very limiting, whereas the outward love expression of low entropy provides just an open door for more growth.
Yes, that's it. Yeah, love optimizes. Love optimizes that group of 10,000. By the time they're done 20 years later, they've basically evolved into the optimal configuration for all of them.
Yeah.
You know? And in the other one, it's optimal for 2 or 3%, or it's not even optimal for them, but at least they have most of the marbles, and it's very suboptimal for them as a whole group, and particularly the large number of people that are at the bottom of that pyramid. So.
Right. Okay, great. Thanks, Tom. Uranus has another, we're going to shift a little bit, but she has some more things that she'd like to try to help you have her understand.
All right.
Tom, I want to really hit this fear business on the head. So I'm going to ask this question too.
Okay.
I've heard you speak about when one is in a meditative state and meets a challenge or something frightening, that one has encountered that as a mirror of their own consciousness. In some respects, it sounds to me very much like how the Buddhists describe the Bardo's state and what happens there. How would you suggest that we respond to such experiences?
Okay, well, the reason that that in a say an out-of-body state, that if you're fearful, you'll end up with scary experiences, is that reality, you create your own reality in several ways. And I mean, some you don't create at all because it's a multiplayer game. You're here with other people, and you have a set and things that are fixed that you don't create, but you create it in many ways. And one of the ways you create it is that you interpret it. Okay. You also create it by the fact that your intent, modifies, how it works out in the future. So if you are fearful, then you interpret things in a fearful way. So if you have a lot of fear, then you see scary things. If you're very frightened, say that you're going to be mugged, then walking through a park is a scary thing to do. It's even scary in the daytime and doubly scary at night. Whereas if you do not have a lot of fear, walking in the park is a lovely thing to do. So you see, we create fear. Fear is also an attractor. When you are very fearful, you attract, well, let's put it this way. You tend to make your fears come true. You attract those things. Yeah, you manifest them. Just that's your intent. You have a fearful intent. You manifest the fear. So when you're in this reality, it's a lot slower. It doesn't work, as fast as it does, say, in an out-of-body reality. But in this reality, let's say you fear that your children are going to grow up, and be drug addicts. They're going to get in with the wrong crowd. And that's a fear of yours. And you fear it so much that you lock your children in the house and don't ever let them out. Right? Mm-hmm. Well, what you'll do is you'll drive them to go out and do drugs because you have, you're going to make your fear come true. Mm-hmm. If you're fearful that nobody likes you and you feel that just, everybody looks down on you and nobody likes you, one of the way to deal with that fear is to be a bully. Force people to, look up to you. Force them to, you will be powerful. You will make them, recognize you and so on. Well, guess what? Nobody likes you because you're a bully, you see, because you were afraid that they wouldn't like you. You act in such a way to make them not like you. If you're afraid that, people where you work won't think you're competent, you will probably act in such a way. You'll be very, you'll be afraid to take assignments. You won't know whether this is good enough, so you'll keep asking, is this okay? Is this okay? Is this okay? And pretty soon, guess what? Everybody will think you're incompetent, you see, because it was the fear of it. You tend to create what you fear. So just that's another way you create your reality. So yes, we have these fears. If you're fearful, you interpret and you imagine frightening things. That's just the way it is. We all know people who are almost sure that, something's going to get them all of the time. And it's not just that they're paranoid, but paranoia is just an expression of fear. That's all it is. So that's not healthy and not good. Well, how do you deal with it? How do you find the fears that you have? We have fears that are outside of our intellect. Most of our fears are outside of our intellect. We have, I don't know, probably, some small percentage of the things that we fear. Do we even know that we fear them? So how do you find these things? I would say you don't start with fear and you don't start with belief, because belief's the same way. You don't know all the beliefs you have. You have a cultural belief, and it's just because you grew up in this culture that you believe those things. You believe in Western culture, you're going to believe that reality is objective and physical, period. That's our culture's view of the world, and how it works. So you will believe that. And when somebody tells you that it's really a virtual reality, you'll have a hard time getting that. What do you mean virtual reality? It just doesn't make sense. It's because it's rubbing up against your belief that it's, that it is physical and objective. So it's very hard to get your arms around it. If you grow up playing virtual reality games, it's much easier because you say, oh yeah, I can see that. I have that, I have that in my mind. So we produce these fears. So I wouldn't look at belief. We have lots of beliefs we don't know we have. I wouldn't really look for the fear. We have lots of fears we don't know we have. But ego is easy to spot. If it's about you, it's your ego. If you say, you should act this way. You need to do it that way. The boss needs to do it this way. And if it's all about, you, then you're talking through your ego. So it's easy, be aware of how many sentences you start with I, me, mine. And some people, that's like, 80% of their sentences, start out that way. But it's not just language. It's your perceptions of others. What's wrong with your relationship? Well, they aren't, doing this, that, or the other. That's what's wrong with the relationship. You see, it's somebody else. It's the problem, you see. So that's about you. What it is, that's what you think, well, that's not me. That's about them. No, it isn't about them. It's about you. You want them to be different for you. You need them to be different. That's about you, not about them at all. So if it's about you, if the vector of your interaction is pointed towards you, then it's ego. Now, when ego is a derivative, the ego, expectations, beliefs are all derivatives of fear. So if you find the ego, which is easy, then just back it up and say, well, why do I feel that way? Why do I know that they need to change? And that's what the problem is. Why do I need them to bring me flowers every Friday? What is that? Well, it's because I'm afraid they really don't like me. So it's a need of mine that they do certain things. So then you find that fear, and then you work on the fear. But you wouldn't know right away that you had a fear that maybe they wouldn't, they didn't really like you. That's invisible to you. But when you see the ego, it will point that out. So that's mainly what we can do about it. Look for ego, and then let the ego lead you to the fear. Look for beliefs. Let the belief lead you to the fear. And then deal with the fear. And the only antidote for fear is courage. And the way I tell most people to deal with a fear, if you have a fear, like you fear, I don't know, whatever, you feel you feel what, your children are going to be drug addicts or somebody doesn't like you, you have these fears, look at it and say, what is the worst that could happen? What is just the very worst thing that can happen? And then deal with that, accept it and deal with that. Say, okay, if my children are drug addicts, I'll still love them. I'll still care about them. I'll still do the best I can for them. I'll be there for them whenever I can, and they will just have to deal with that because that's their life and their path, and I hope they will learn something from it. It'll be sad, but, I can accept that. They'll be big people, and they make their own choices. So you deal with it, and then after you've dealt with it, there's nothing to be afraid of because you've accepted the worst and dealt with it. So that's the way to deal with fear. Okay, what if these people don't like me? What's gonna, or think I'm incompetent? Okay, what's the worst? Everybody knows I'm incompetent. All right, now deal with that. What am I gonna do? Well, I'm gonna, make sure I do my job well. I'm going to make sure, I know what it is I'm doing, and I'm going to I'm going to interact with people in this way because they already know I'm incompetent. So, that's nothing new. Now I'm just going to try to make the best of it. So basically that'll start having you act in a way that makes you look competent, you see? So you deal with fear by accepting it, the worst. Accept the worst and then go on. That pulls all the teeth out of the fear once you accept it. And find the fear by looking for ego. Now we all do know some of the fears we have, and we do know some of the beliefs we have, and those are easy. But it's the ones that are at the being level rather than at the intellectual level that really bite the hardest most of the time.
Yeah. Well, I have to say thank you very much for bearing with all my questions about this sort of thing. But you fulfilled my hope, and that was to give us a wonderfully articulated map and guidance, how we can expose and explore fear and ego and the such, so that we can increase our decision space and arrive at love. So thank you very much, Tom.
Well, you're very welcome. I'm glad you're hearing something that helps.
Chipper has another question he'd like to pose to you, Tom.
Okay.
Tom, you've just discussed fear, belief, and ego, and were very eloquent in doing so. Can you share your thoughts on how my big toe, science, objective, subjective, exploratory provings to PMR's self-image relates to beauty, joy, elegance, mystery, awe, and love? I'd ask a specific question, but don't know where to put the question mark.
Do you particularly like to have my concepts of beauty, joy, eloquence, mystery, and awe and love, or just is it more general than that?
To me, beauty and joy and love are inseparable to me. I find great joy when I see beauty, when I behold beauty, and I feel such love at that moment that I have a hard time separating them.
Yes, they all are very interconnected, that's for sure. If you live a life of love, you will have much joy. And your life will be a beauty to behold. They go together. But I'd be a little more specific, and I'll say what inspires us at the being level is what we call beautiful. If it inspires us at the being level, we call it beautiful. Okay, what inspires us, for example, at the intellectual level, we simply call inspirational. And what appears to be good to us individually, okay, for beauty is in the mind of the beholder, that's true. So what appears good to us individually, but at the same time is not particularly inspirational, we call pretty, attractive, nice, or pleasant.
Yeah.
It fails to sufficiently stir us at the core for us to call it beautiful. So that's these things are different, but related. So that's one way we can kind of look at a difference there, is that what inspires us at the being level we call beautiful. Now, love is, as I say, it's the nature of a low entropy consciousness. That's our purpose. That's the opposite of fear. It's what we are to become. So that's kind of the core thing here is love. And love, of course, creates beauty and joy. Now, eloquence basically means that you can communicate very profound things with few words. That kind of makes something eloquent, and that's an ability that beauty has. Right? Beauty, things that are beautiful are eloquent in themselves, you know. Yeah. And I would say that, you know, a beautiful garden or flower or even architecture is eloquent in what it says about the people who created it, or the evolution that created it, or you know, just its existence in its environment. You know, I would call that kind of an eloquence. It doesn't just have to be language eloquence, but right. There's eloquence of being as well. Matter of fact, in science, we say we have a thing called Occam's razor that says if it's not simple, if it isn't, you know, if it has too many assumptions, then it's not fundamental science. Mm-hmm. So we kind of toss things out because they're not eloquent, right. if you will. Now, all that, I guess, is when you kindly see a picture that's bigger than the one you thought. Yeah. You see something that is inspiring, that is so immense, that makes you feel, I guess, that makes you realize, I shouldn't say it doesn't make you feel small, it makes you realize that you're just a very small piece of something much bigger, right. much more fundamental. And some people take that as a negative. Oh, I'm just a little tiny piece, I'm nothing. It's not that way. It's that I'm a part of something magnificent. Right. You see, it's a different attitude. And I think that's what I'd talk about awe. And mystery, I don't know that mystery is fundamental, but I suppose it kind of goes with the rest of these, in that if there are things that you do not know, you know, then they're mysterious to you. And that's really how you define being a mystic. A mystic, you know, is someone who gets, what shall we say, has an understanding that is not derived from physical process, that's right. immeasurable, right. you know, that is, you know, beauty, joy, love, awe, you know, those may all have to do with it. But a mystic is someone that drives their knowledge and their information from something beyond physical reality and physical process. Right. And it's mystical. The things that they think, they say, well, here's a rule of the way the big world works, and that's called a mystical, you know, assumption or something. It's only mystical because people don't understand it. A lot of things that were considered mystical are now science. Mm-hmm. It was mystical the way the stars and planets, you know, seem to go around the earth. Right. That was that whole process was very mystical, and it was tied up with all sorts of deities and other sorts of mystical things. And then one day, you know, we have Newton comes along with gravity, and we say, oh, I see how that works, and it's no longer mystical. So mystery is kind of a challenge to me. I'm a scientist, so, right. you know, I would say that, right? Mystery is a challenge. When I come to a mystery, I want to understand it. Mm-hmm. I want to unmystify it, if you will. I want to take it out of the category of mystery and mystical and put it into the category of science, because there'll always be more of those things out there that we don't know. You know, that I think the list of things that we don't know is so long that I don't expect to ever see the end of it. So mystery is always there, but it's a challenge to me to understand it. And I think love also provides eloquence. And if you understand mysteries, it also provides eloquence, because once you really understand something, it's generally not that hard to explain to somebody else. Matter of fact, Einstein had a quote which I don't really remember, but the gist of it was that if he couldn't explain his theory to his, I think it was maybe niece, or I don't know, someone in his family, it was, that had no technical background whatsoever. And he said if he couldn't explain it to them to where they felt they understood it, then that meant that he really didn't understand it himself. Right. And I think that's mostly true, that if you grow up and you learn and you become love, then beauty and joy just become a part of your life. But eloquence actually does too, in a sense that once you understand it, really understand it, it's not that hard to explain. It's difficult to explain when you think you understand it, but not quite, or you don't really understand it all the way. Then you kind of stammer around it and go at it this way and that way, and it's difficult to explain. So all of these do go together, and I think it's a good list, but they're all a little different. But the number one thing there, I think, that is the mother of all the rest is love.
Yeah.
Love is the key thing. That's the motivator in the reality system that we're in. It runs on love. It evolves on love. That's what it's doing. You know, that's how it evolves. It evolves by becoming love. So it has a choice: evolve or de-evolve, live or die. That's the choice.
Right.
The way it evolves is by lowering entropy, and as we just discussed, lowering entropy for an information system means becoming love. So that means becoming love or die, de-evolve. So it's just that, it's just that simple. That's the system we're in. It's evolving and becoming love because it doesn't want to dissolve and go away.
Well, thank you so much. It's just been such a pleasure listening to you.
Well, you're quite welcome. Been my pleasure to be here. I hope I've said something useful.
Well, you've said a lot of very, very useful things, Tom. Earlier on, you were starting to get into a discussion of how to help social progress move forward so that we can turn away from the fear and control and into love, to reduce entropy on a social basis. Did you have specific thoughts that you wanted to bring forward on that?
Yeah, well, we talked about, that the only way that you can improve the whole is to improve yourself. So we've already done that. So what I was referring to there is that, I'm looking forward into where we might go, and as a society, as a group, and how we might get there. Well, obviously, love is the answer, right? If the question is a big question and really important, then, and not trivial, then love is the answer. So how are we going to get there? How is our society going to turn that corner? Well, I think the first thing that's going to have to happen, or maybe the most efficient thing, well, there's probably 1,000 different ways we can get there, right? But the one I see as being the most likely, we're going to have to have the high priests of our culture open our minds a little bit. Now, in the old days, the high priests were the people that were the individuals that told the rest of us what to believe. That was the function of the high priest. They defined what you should believe and what you shouldn't, what's believable, what's right, what's wrong, what's the right way to be, the right way to act. Today, in at least Western culture, the high priests of our culture are scientists. So that's the people that we're going to need to start with, I think, to get the ball rolling in a cultural or in a world view rather than kind of out on the fringes. I mean, this ball's been rolling out on the fringes for millennia, right? You can read, the Bhagavad Gita, I don't know how many, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 years, that goes back almost to the very first writing. You have people who were trying to spread the idea that love is core. You have, the Buddhists were 500 BC, 1000 BC, where they were kind of on the top of their game. And it was the same thing, life is an illusion, reality is an illusion. It's all about love and caring and what was their favorite word? Compassion. So we've had these ideas have been bouncing around in the fringes of cultures all over the place for thousands and thousands of years. What it's going to take to go mainstream is that the high priests, the scientists, the high priests of our culture are going to need to open our minds, increase our decision space, give us a bigger picture, and that's asking for a lot, because these are the small picture people, right? These are the people who are into, material positivism, or what is that called? Material, it's a group, it's a concept group in philosophy anyway. It basically means that physical reality is it. It's everything. If you can't measure it, it either doesn't exist or it isn't important. That's a scientific philosophy. Well, the Western culture, and I say our culture, well, we're not the whole world, but the rest of the world is very quickly adopting Western culture. Western material culture is kind of spread everywhere. It's not just in the West, it's in the East. It's anybody that's walked around in Tokyo, can see the similarities to New York City and Los Angeles. It's all kind of Western culture, if you will, because Western culture is shown to be very powerful and productive. You can make stuff, you can make things, you have, a higher standard of living, if you will, this sort of thing. So Western culture is dominating the planet, and science and engineering basically dominate the list of things that are true and believable. And I think the first step is going to come when scientists realize that reality is virtual. And that's been improving for some decades now. Every few months, there's another scientist that's saying, virtual reality really is better physics. It answers more questions. And that's true. And it's going to win in physics. It's going to become the position of physics eventually, because it's right. It does do better physics, just like the round Earth eventually is going to supplant the flat Earth because it's right. That's just the way it is. So eventually people will have to come to that conclusion, because virtual reality is better physics. But that's just step one. And I think we're moving to that. There's any number of papers these days and books written about this being a virtual reality, and how that answers more of the questions of physics. It better describes our reality as we measure it than the old theory, which is, physical matter reality is it, and it represents everything. It has so many holes in it, so many questions that just can't be answered. Like, what was before, what started the Big Bang? What created that little ball of high energy, high temperature energy there? Where'd that come from? The universe wasn't here. It didn't come from our universe, because the universe didn't exist yet. So we have those. We have double slit quantum mechanics. Why does that work? We have entanglement. Doesn't make any sense. You see, you have all these holes. The expanding universe, what's it expanding into? If there's nothing but our physical universe, what's the universe expanding into? None of these things make sense, because from that perspective, it can't answer the questions. Yet a virtual reality answers all of those questions and more. It says, why does Pear Labs get the results they get? Why can a man raise and lower pH in a jar of water with his mind? How does how does the placebo effect work? So I think first we're going to get science that says we're in a virtual reality. And I believe that's going to be sooner rather than later in historical terms. That means somewhere in the next 10 to 50 years, we're gonna get there. And when they get there, and it becomes a scientific fact that we live in a virtual reality, the question becomes, well, if this is a simulation, who programmed it? If this is a simulation, where's the simulation coming from? And right now in physics, the physicists who come to that point, they just use the term other and they put it in quotes. Well, it comes from other, because a reality, you see, can't create itself. A simulation can't create itself. It has to be created somewhere. So once science says that other is real, other is fundamental to our existence, then that's a whole can of worms that's going to jump up. And those scientists can just kind of put it aside and say, well, we don't know, so let's go on to something else. The rest of the world isn't. When other becomes a scientific fact, people are going to want answers, need answers, and we're going to have lots of turmoil like we usually have at big paradigm shifts, that affect everybody, because that's going to affect everybody, you see, because what am I doing here? Where do I come from? What's going on? It comes from other, what does that mean? And we're going to see, all sorts of religions and philosophers and metaphysicians are going to be all over that. It's going to be a very confusing time, but eventually they'll get to the second big paradigm shift that they're going to need, and that is the computer is consciousness. You see, consciousness is the computer, and consciousness is the fundamental beginning then for everything else. Everything else is a creation of consciousness. So then we'll get to that point, then it's basically all in the bag, because once you get there, the next thing you end up with, if you look at it logically, is just, what I end up with, and that is that love is the answer, that we are consciousness and we're evolving. And it's just kind of a logical process that says that's the way it has to be. So, if we're wondering, how are we going to get to this idea that love is what it's all about in a larger way, not just out on the fringe way it's always been, but in the core of the society? Well, that's my idea of how it will likely work out, is that first, the high priests of science will finally come to the point where they have to admit that reality is virtual because nothing else will explain the data. And then secondly, we'll take the leap of paradigm that the computer is the larger consciousness system. From then, that love is the answer will be a logical deduction. So that's how I think we're going to get there. And that's my hope for the future, that we do get there. Otherwise, it's pretty much going to stay in the margins. If we don't get the high priests in on our side, it's always going to be in the margins. It's going to be, where it's always been. There will be a small minority that gets it, and the large majority will reject it. So that's going to leave us about where we are now. And we need to get beyond where we are now for one particular reason, and that is if our science and technology outstrips our wisdom in using that science and technology, we're very likely to cause ourselves some serious trouble. We are more likely to destroy ourselves, along with all the rest of the consciousness critters around here. Because of that, we need balance. And right now we're very out of balance. We're very left brain dominant, out of balance, and our science and engineering is not informed by wisdom. It's mainly informed by profit. So those are things that will change, though, once we have these two paradigm shifts. So that's just kind of a different idea that probably you've never read about or heard about anywhere, that I thought I would throw out there, and maybe people would find that interesting. I do see some moving and quickening toward that goal of this becoming a wider spread understanding. And I'm hopeful that it will be sooner rather than later, but I think eventually we'll get there in any case.
Okay. Well, no, that's terrific. Thanks, Tom. That kind of brings together a couple of the things that we wanted to find out, was how do we get to the social change and who are those leaders going to be? And certainly the engineering and scientific people who aren't necessarily as wrapped up in their smaller worlds and lower levels of consciousness will be able to hopefully take us forward. Were there any other messages that you wanted to get out at this time? I guess for your listeners, one thing I'll say, it's far enough in the future that people have lots of time to prepare for it. I am going to be doing a workshop in Spain, and I think one in Portugal in the fall. The one in Portugal should be in like November, and the one in Spain then is going to be the following March. And those should be a lot of fun if anybody's interested. And you basically said go to YouTube. If you don't know how to get to my site in YouTube, put in TWCJR44, or just put in Thomas Campbell and it'll take you to the site. Or you just Google Thomas Campbell and it'll take you to all those sites too. And there's mounds of video there. My
the way I work is that after I give a workshop, as soon as I take video, and as soon as I can get it up to YouTube, I put it up on YouTube. Everything I have done is free and on YouTube, and the books are free. Don't forget that. You can get them in Google Books. So there is information out there, and I hope I've been able to say something that other people can take away something of value, because that's really the point of it all. That's why you're here as seekers and trying to understand the things that you find in your environment that are interesting. And that's why I'm here as a seeker, trying to understand, the bigger things in my environment, and we get together and we share. And the hope is that everybody will be better off for it.
Okay, Tom, thank you so much. We've been speaking with Tom Campbell, the author of My Big Toe. Tom's websites are mybigtoe.com and mbtevents.com. Thank you so much again for sharing your time and thoughts with us today. We hope our listeners have gained insight into the aspects of Tom's theory and thinking we've been discussing, and we hope you've enjoyed it as much as we did. Consciousness is a topic of such expansive scope, a gestalt concept that we've only touched upon just a few areas. The larger reality cannot be adequately described and discussed in the limited time we've had available today, yet we are very thankful for the time that has been shared with us. We, the members of Time Monk Radio Network, are forward-looking and hope to anticipate what the future brings so that we may be better prepared for its arrival. While the past is important, we'll leave that to the historians as long as its lessons have been learned. On behalf of Fox and all of the members of Time Monk Radio Forum, thank you, Tom. It's been our great pleasure to have you join us for this enlightening discussion.
Well, thank you. It's been my pleasure to be here.
Thank you very much, Tom.
Very much. It was again a very great pleasure chatting with you.
You're very welcome.